Present, we have Mr. Krasnov, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Flynn, myself, Mr. Peterson, Superintendent Testani, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Tracy Rinaldi, and a special guest, moderator of the RTM, Marcy Spoliar, and was a son, and I have a same birthday. They children buddies. Will be joining us to help out with our town hall after a couple of business items. But right now, if we could stand, say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, as I said, we have two very quick business items. All right, I believe they will be very quick business items. First, item 3A, approval of the Fairfield Cares survey with the recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the Fairfield Cares survey. Can I have a motion? Mrs. Jacobson, seconded by Mr. Krasnov. This was brought up for a first read at our prior meeting. Some board members made comments, and the version that we have now and is online as an enclosure is somewhat changed. A couple of edits. Any questions, comments from members of the board?
I just want to say a quick thank you to the Fairfield Cares committee for taking a look at my edits and considering them and incorporating some of them. I just appreciate the time.
Anyone else on this item? It's a voting item, so bring it up to the public. Any public comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Asa.
That's all right. I just wanted to say, I had missed the last meeting. I was on a trip, and I haven't not gotten a chance to dive into this, so I will abstain from this tonight, but in no way is that any indication, one way or the other, of my feelings on it. I just didn't get the time to fully dive in.
Thanks for the context. Members of the public with comments. All right, seeing none, back to the board. All in favor? The vote is unanimous. Or I'm sorry.
No.
All in favor? We have Mr. Krasnov. You said that to me. Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Flynn, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mrs. Tracy Rinaldi. All opposed? None. All abstained? Mr. Asa, thank you. The motion passes 7-0-1. Okay. Our next item, again, we had a preview of this at our last meeting, the approval of capital non-recurring projects with the recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the following capital non-recurring projects: Roger Littler Middle School fire alarm upgrade, Tomlinson Middle School safety and security upgrade, and Fairfield High School elevator number 2 modernization. Can I have a motion? Mrs. Maxon Kelly, seconded by Mr. Asa. Thank you. Again, these are projects that were originally in our operating budget for next year, but in conversations with the town has offered to move them onto town bonding. And in preparation for that process, we have prepared them as if we have normally done with our normal capital non-recurring projects. And Mr. Testani, there's no changes to this from what we saw in the first read, correct? Any questions, Mrs. Flynn?
Do we, and apologies as well, I was not present for our last meeting. Do we have a date certain from other town bodies for when we may see this in front of them?
Not a date certain that I'm aware of, no. But it is in the conversation. I will keep forwarding it. But again, this is in preparation for just trying to belt and suspenders this project.
Yep.
We also received an email that this would to confirm, so.
To help it get moving. Great, thank you.
Sorry, just to clarify, was that all 3 boards?
The email,
But when you said that this has been in discussion with the town, was that with all 3 boards?
It's been discussion with the first line.
And just to clarify, these are actually still in our budget. Should anything happen along the way, they're still contained within our budget.
That's correct. As you remember, many board members were very anxious about taking them out of our budget because of the urgency and importance of these projects. So again, just trying to make sure that we are covered in case the town is able to take them onto town bonding. We can just go right ahead and do that.
Can I continue?
Oh, please.
So yeah, obviously these are very critical items. To me, they're like life and safety matters. So they're important that they move forward and get done. I just have a concern about setting some sort of a precedent where we're taking projects that would be in our operating and moving on to capital, just knowing how much capital we have sitting there already. It does feel like a little bit of the cutting of the line. But again, these are critical and they are still in the budget, so I'll support them tonight, but just wanted to express that we've got a lot of needs. So I hope that this doesn't become a way that's starting to offset our operating budget by supplanting the long list of capital needs that we have. So, but we are in a dire situation on both ends of the spectrum right now, so just wanted to kind of put that thought out there.
Ms. Tracy?
Yeah, just in reference to that, and historically, would these not have normally been capital non-recurring in the past? I mean, if they were over a threshold, wouldn't they have normally been
Well, you may remember
presented this way versus in our budget?
Well, I mean, I think on an individual basis, there's smaller projects. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Papageorge wanted to increase the cost of one so that the total would just cross over that $1 million threshold for town bonding. I know that that's an important threshold for the Board of Finance to consider.
Oh, I thought that threshold was much lower, like 100,000. Maybe Mr. Papageorge can confirm that. I mean, I don't remember it being $1 million for this. With regard to the comment about it being a precedent, I don't think it is. But I could be wrong.
Sorry, can I just clarify? I didn't mean precedent on the amounts. I meant precedent of like they were in our operating, we're pulling them out to put them into capital. We put large projects into sometimes in the operating budget, but the Tomlinson was specifically increased from our budget amount on purpose by like 80,000-90,000 to kind of bump that one up actually.
And you're worried about kind of this ad hoc bonding, crowding out larger projects.
Yeah, and right. I mean, not to the point where I'm not supporting it, but
Agreed. So you are correct. The Tomlinson one was bumped up, not for $1 million. It was to meet the $200,000 threshold for a non-recurring.
200. Okay, so there it was a much lower number.
Capital projects are $1 million or above, and the non-recurring we usually
Okay.
around 200,000.
Okay, so in essence, and not to argue with you, but to me, it's not a big deal. So it seems like this is past practice, so I think it's fine. I hope they do it.
Ms. Jacobson brings up a good point. I'm hoping this doesn't supplant or become what our bonding allocation is for the year, because currently we don't have any other bonding allocation. It's kind of up in the air. It's a mystery project. This is all we're really asking for. The other thing was seed money, and that's not been. But
Mr. Krasnoff, your voice is dropping very low.
sorry. I was saying that I was hoping that this doesn't take the place of some of the other projects we were trying to put forward, like the seed money that at this point has stalled. So this is kind of one of the only bonding asks we now have for next year. So I'm just hoping that that's not replacing the other bonding asks we had.
Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, out to the public, any questions or comments on the non-recurring projects? Bring it back to the board, all in favor? That vote is unanimous, 8-0. Thank you very much. All right, and with that, Mr. Tessani, thank you very much for your attendance at that part of the meeting.
that's the
We'll move into the item 3C, discussions of facilities, finances, and programs. As I mentioned earlier, we have Marcy Spollier. Thank you, Marcy, for coming and helping us with this. I'm glad we had that few extra minutes because the crowd has definitely thickened. It was great. So I will turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. How we're gonna work this is we're gonna have you come up to the table. There's a sign-in sheet there, for you to sign in. If you could state your name, do you state address? Yeah, and address here, in town, to the board, and then you can ask your question. Expect to take no longer than 3 minutes, and then the board will have an additional less than 7 minutes to answer in general, and I'll call on those members. So if the first person wants to come on up and have a seat at the table. Welcome. Thank you.
Alyssa Kent. I'm at 186 Oak Road. Hey, good to see you guys. Thanks for hosting this. I have a number of things that I'll just ask about and hopefully you guys can keep track of them. The first is a question about how we work through contractual obligations, particularly the collective bargaining portion of things, and wondering if the town is involved in that and if there's a final sign off on that collective bargaining, with the opinion that our contractual obligations moving forward should also be a commitment by the town. So to the extent that we have contractual obligations that account to certain percentage each year, there shouldn't be a question year over year as to whether those are covered in the overall budget. The next is just thinking about revenue generation, and particularly as it comes to busing. I have no idea if this is in compliance with the state, if it's allowed, if there's other towns that do it. But is there an ability to do a nominal fee for busing that would then start to help create efficiencies in how people, if people opt out of busing? Again, probably not within state law, but maybe there's another way of thinking about it in terms of incentivizing people to opt out if they are truly not using the busing and not needed. To, you know, create busing efficiencies so that the people that need and want a bus can still get one. Still on revenue, thinking about expanded tuition, particularly at Walter Fitzgerald campus. I've been super proud to see what we've been able to do there. It seems like a great opportunity. We have the facilities to do it, and are remarketing it to other towns to outplace students to Walter Fitzgerald. Similarly, the revenue of fields and gyms on our educational facilities, even during the summer. Are we seeing that revenue? And if not, are we billing out for the expenses that we have on the Board of Ed side to the other town bodies if they're the ones collecting the revenue on our spaces? And then, sorry, the last one, you know, an obvious place in the tuition or in the budget this year was that huge percentage increase on tuition salary bumps, or sorry, not tuition, but salary bumps based on 7th year degrees. That seems unsustainable moving forward. I'm hugely in favor of our teachers continuing their education, specialized programming, all that kind of stuff. Just imploring us to look at what that program looks like, what drove that huge bump, whether we feel good about what the program looks like and what were the drivers. Part of it feels like the drivers may have been that teachers were trying to stay competitive and not leave the district. So they were looking at other ways to get to the salaries that they need to get to. But
Just gonna ask you to wrap it up.
just one more thing, whether that program should look like tuition reimbursement in addition to a salary bump or a more modest salary bump to more normally equalize the opportunity for all of our teachers that may not have the upfront cash to be able to get that degree. And that we see all teachers taking advantage of that continuing education.
Thank you. What board member wants to go first? Mr. Asa, and if I say representative, I'm gonna apologize.
I'm gonna try and go quick and hit on a couple so other people can talk because we gotta move it along. But how we work through the collective bargaining, the chair of the board assigns us different liaison positions. So there's several different collective bargaining units, from the FEA, which is the teachers, to the administrators, to custodians, secretaries, paras, everything. And there is a liaison with the teachers union. It was myself and Mrs. Jacobson this last time as the chair and vice chair. And it is a process in which, especially with the teachers and the administrators, there is a liaison from the Board of Finance who attends those meetings and any kind of mediation and et cetera. And then we approve it, and then it goes to the RTM. So the RTM does have to have the final say on approval. So yes, the town is saying that we know that. And with the last several major contracts with considerable increases that we needed, there was no opposition and not really any questions to it. So that answers that. With regard to the ability to charge for busing, I've been on the safety committee for transportation since I've been on this board. And so that doesn't really qualify me for this, but I'm not aware of any allowance that we would have to charge for busing. The state statute or the state guideline says that that we are expected when it is reasonable and fair. I can't remember the words. And I agree with you on the marketing for Walter Fitzgerald. We've been talking about that for years. I know the administration's been trying. With fields and gyms, we do charge. We actually recently in the last couple of years have increased our rates and we've been collecting and to my knowledge, they're collecting much better now. And with this.
Charge not only to private for-profit, but also within town.
No, we don't charge like Parks and Rec. So they run summer camps in our school buildings.
Yeah.
We don't charge there. Parks and Rec is able to offer camp at a reasonable, it's like the deal of the century.
Absolutely.
We have a good partnership with Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
And we try to keep that relationship as a give and take. We have not explored trying to charge them because obviously if we charge them, they're gonna pass that on to the taxpayer.
Right, but that's what we're talking about is costs getting passed on to the taxpayer. So my question is particularly where we have expenses, janitorial or otherwise, exploring what that looks like
Yeah,
and how it affects our.
and the facilities committee has recently brought it up, the finance committee, they've talked about it in policy. We're working on a new policy regarding that. So it is in the works. And then with regard to the seventh year, that was part of the collective bargaining with, I was on that committee. I can't speak to the details of it because it was part of negotiations. But
Is it new?
It is, yes. Well, it is new, yes. And it was.
Explain the blip or we.
And there,
investigate?
yeah, there was an intended pool for that to be used. The superintendent and his staff have recently been working with and working and telling the FEA what is acceptable and putting some guardrails in place.
Any other members? Ms. Flynn?
Thank you so much. I'm gonna try and pick some quick phrases that covered fun. Just for the public to know, and you, right in our budget book, there's a whole revenue section. So you can see a breakdown of federal funds we get, and right there are building rentals and custodial fees projected for this upcoming year is $262,000. So and I will, to Mr. Race's point, I think there's a balance that these are, public facilities. We want to leave them accessible to the public while charging a fee that covers usage. So there has been an uptick just in 2023-24, the revenue was 119K. So while it's not, I think we're all very cautious of how we implement these kind of changes and the impact on the public to that. But I will say that I'm a member of the finance committee and we are currently talking about revenue, whether that be advertising, tuition. We covered at least those two topics. And I think those are going to be coming more as we talk about not only what we're taking in or giving out, but what we're taking in. I think revenue is a missing piece of this. So I appreciate it because we don't know. Watching all of our ESSER grants and things kind of elapsed, I think is really brought to the front of people's minds that we aren't just funded on a municipal level. We are funded through a whole variety of ways, whether that be state, federal, local. So we're looking at all those avenues, but that's a piece of it.
Mr. Peterson?
The only thing that I want to add, you mentioned specifically with the respect to rentals for facilities covering custodial overtime. And that was a major driver of 2 cycles back, raising the rates to make sure that those were covered. So that is a thing that is in our calculus.
Ms. Rinaldi?
So just following up, I actually highlighted expanded tuition for Walter Fitz. I think that's a great idea. And I'm also on the Finance and Budget Committee. So that's something highlighted in green. I think that's a really great brainstorm idea and also an area of revenue that we can look into more. And just, I think around socialization and just marketing as well, that would be helpful there.
Mr. Krasnoff?
I just wanted to add something back to the fields. Most of the fields actually fall under Parks and Rec, not us, so. Unfortunately, it's not the revenue going to us, it's still going to the town, but it doesn't fall into our purview.
Ms. Guernsey?
Hi, thanks so much for coming out. And I think that this conversation on revenue is one where I would really welcome public input because this kind of brainstorm is really important. To comment on Walter Fitzgerald, we periodically get updates from our special ed director, and they have done marketing. They've had some interest in that school from other, students in other towns, and as far as we've heard, it just hasn't happened yet. So I'm assuming it's still being actively marketed, but what else can, right? So to your point, we had a policy committee meeting recently where we talked about transportation, and we had a really nice group from the public attending, and they offered a lot of suggestions a lot of them that couldn't work, some of them that were sort of interesting and maybe could. And it had some of the board members brainstorming outside of this about, what are some other things we could be thinking about and exploring. So this is what can be happening between now and the rest of this budget cycle. Like, let's get to work. So if you have great ideas, I mean, we're only 9 people, so let's hear them and explore them because we have some time to do that. So thank you.
We're a little over 10, but go real quick. I have one other thing, and something that to Ms. Guernsey's point I found very interesting was when you talk about the opt-out for busing. And we've discussed it here that you can't incentivize, I think we just covered it at our last budget meeting, but one thing I thought was interesting when you kind of coupled it was, could we get a more aggressive advertising campaign going to really explain to our population what it means to opt out? And because we have, there's two sides of all of this. It's the need of families that, we receive the emails, I read every single one of them. And on the other end, it's the data we have on how many people are on our buses. So they're both conflicting. I want to see a way that we can approach that, but maybe if we could get a more aggressive advertising campaign to families and explain it and get more opt-outs that aren't using the buses, maybe we could see some wiggle room there. I thought that was a great idea.
Thank you for coming out, Alyssa. If the next person wants to come on up, state your name and address.
Cindy Rosado, 564 Duck Farm Road. So I'm new to this whole process. I'm gonna have a kindergarten in fall come in, and then also another one the next year, and then one 5 years. So this is all new. I'm here for the bus issue. We live on Duck Farm Road, and so we are just where we will get a bus. Duck Farm is half sidewalks, half just road, and we're around a blind curve. And realistically, for elementary, no one expects a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old to walk themselves to school, which means that I become a walker. And the time that it takes to walk them to school and back, I'm lucky to work from home, but that's an hour each way to try to get them to school. Congestion to drive is ridiculous. Like I've seen it at Osborne, all the schools, the line to get there. So that's, again, it's still the average hour. The before and after care programs, that's great. That's $225 a week for one kid, $500 a week for 2 kids. So the cost is not small. When going through the ridership, did a lot of Excel today, with these buses, I think there's an opportunity to combine routes and lessen the buses and still make the numbers. So just as an example, I'm not picking on any school. Burr has 10 buses that they use for their schools. Right now, the average ridership is 25 children per bus. Each bus can fit 72 to 84, according to transportation today. But that's 3 seating across. So if you do 2 seating across, that's about 48 to 56. If we went and reduced from 10 to 7 buses, the assigned number would be 47 kids per bus. But if you take the average that actually rides it, you're still at 37 kids per bus. So right now at Burr, again, these are all my figures, so I'm sure there's definitely flaws. At Burr, you can reduce 3 buses. At Dwight, you can reduce 1 bus, again, just based on kind of what the averages that I was doing. Jennings 1, Mill Hill 1, Sherman 1, Fairfield Woods Middle School 2, Ludlow 2, Tomlinson 3. Right now, that's an average of 15 buses that can be reduced by combos. And I'm sure there's limits to how long their ridership can happen, how long they can be on the bus. So even, with my rough estimate of 15 buses, I'm sure you can get to that 9 bus without having to make people walkers. And, elementary school go up to 1 mile and middle school go up to 1.5 miles. I think there's a due diligence of really taking apart the bus schedules, the routes, and really looking at where the reduction can come. Because these ridership numbers, just based on what is provided, you can combine buses. And, maybe it's not 15 the way that I'm averaging it out right here, but maybe it is that 9 that you guys are looking to achieve without having to make elementary school kids walk and do that mile. So I'm just asking that instead of just doing a simple cut of and increasing the walking for elementary and middle, that someone, whoever that is, goes through and actually sees where the reduction can. Because just based on numbers, it looks like you can reduce at some schools.
Thank you, Cindy. We'll take Ms. Maxon Connelly.
Nice. So thanks for coming. At our policy committee meeting where we approved the change, which again, the three of us approved it unanimously based on one premise, which is to give this board options with what we were guessing was to come, which did come, which was the budget cut. And again, obviously, very early in the process, a lot can still happen. But better to have options than to say our hands are tied, we can only do X. And one of the things that came out of that meeting, which was so helpful, and I think all three of us appreciated it, and Mrs. Guernsey has already referenced it, were the ideas from the public. And just some of them maybe not feasible, but there was a tremendous number of ideas that came out of that. And all the letters that have come in have a lot of ideas in it. And that is why after policy finished with it and approved the change for it to maintain as an option, we referred it to the finance committee exactly for this point so that they could keep delving further into it. We went, as you described, characterize it as the simple straight cut, moving up the numbers. And that does, we know, bring us $750,000. But if there are other ways to do it, and again, I think it was Mr. Asa said, let the conversation continue. And so finance committee will be picking up, I believe, at your next meeting. And so they're going to be looking at other options, that could surface. But you did reference one thing, specifically regarding Burr and Dwight. And again, every school is worth taking a second look at. But you definitely can start running into extremely long rider times. As you make those buses effective in terms of using up the seats, you're also now looking at a 45-minute ride. I'm making up these numbers, 45-minute ride, hour-long ride for those same 5-year-olds. And that is also, a tough pill to swallow. It's been something that we as a board have tried to avoid.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I can talk.
Mr.
Mr. President.
I'm gonna elaborate on that. So Dwight and Burr do have pretty long rides as it is. So for an example, if you were to add more stops, they have to stop at every stop, whether the kid's on the bus or not. They have to make sure to get in so they can get off. So you're now adding exponential amount of stops. So the length is gonna be longer. Not that it's not a great idea. It's just logistically, I think it would be a little difficult. The other thing is in terms of walking, and I know we all feel this way, we're not gonna make any kid walk if it's not safe. Like, there's no way we're having kids cross the Post Road. There's no way we're having kids cross Black Rock Turnpike. At least in my feelings, there's no kid crossing dangerous roads to get to school. Now, there are some ways that people can get to school and walk that may be safe. I'm assuming a lot of us may look at it to save some money, but I just want to make it clear, we're not trying to put kids in danger. That's the last thing any of us ever want to do.
Ms. Jacobson.
Hi, thank you for coming and talking and sharing ideas. And I'm sure that a lot of these will be taken up and always open to hearing them. With that, I would say, especially in terms of Burr and Dwight, they're the highest ridership in the district, actually. So kudos to them for actually being on the bus. Our middle schools are also doing a lot of good work because a lot of our kids, the middle schools all have high ridership as well. But there are definitely schools here where we know, other boards know, general residents are asking us for years, why are you running half-empty buses? That is a fact.
Oh, yeah.
It is a fact. And some schools are better and worse than others. Like our high schools are incredibly low, but we're still paying for those seats, right? So this is definitely something I think that we absolutely have to address. The second point I'll say is this. The distances that Fairfield have are lower than the state regulations, right? So the state has these distances, 1 mile for elementary, 1.5 miles for middle, and 2 miles for high school that are the state regulations for what something constitutes for not being a hazardous distance. So we are lower than that right now, which is why this whole issue has been brought up, because we are lower, which means we're paying for more buses. I think the idea on a campaign of get on the bus is good. We got a lot of emails, and I don't want to go too far in this, maybe others have other points, but we got a lot of emails about more congestion on the road. I would hazard to say that in some instances, they're already on the road because they're not on the bus. So getting more people on the bus would actually mean the people who are not eligible for the bus would have an easier time getting to the school because they won't have as much congestion. So there's big discrepancies here by building, including at Riverfield. So,
When was the last time the routes have been revamped, relooked at, seen what the average time is? So yes, if you're bringing yourself to a 45-minute bus route, whatever, not great, but still, that still allows then those amount of children to still be able to get transportation. I mean, at some point, someone has to give, and whether that's us as a parent that says, okay, I gotta suck it up and now spend 2 hours out of my day getting my children to and from school, or is it the parent that's kid is on Burr and now their kid is now 3 minutes more on the bus because they have to make an extra stop? I agree, these buses are empty, which is not good for the environment, not good for a lot of different areas. But when was the last time that we've looked at those routes and said, hey, can we combine, route number 12, 7, and 6 together, to make it more efficient?
I'll let Mr. Easter pick that question.
That's just a question, not.
Yeah. I'm just gonna finish up my one last point, is that since COVID, Fairfield's been running 8 buses less than is ideal actually to have kids have reasonable bus times. We're running at 111 routes versus the 119 that is ideal for the number of busers that we have. So we know that we're already running short, which is why the time on the bus has grown so exponentially. As Mr. Krasnoff say, you're still running. So we're already running at super efficient, in terms of those routes. So in terms of rerunning them, I'll let Mr. Easter pick that up, but just for this exercise, we just had them rerun, and the numbers that would have lost a bus were a lot bigger until they ran the hazardous conditions that are in the regs. So those numbers came significantly down, but
Close to 10, I know I saw Miss Guernsey had her hand up, I'll defer to Mr. Teresa.
Yeah, so with regard to the routes, they're looked at in real time all the time. They're changed throughout the year. So unfortunately, due to driver shortages, we've had to collapse routes that we didn't want to, and we have had longer bus rides. So our transportation department is actually looking at routes all the time. It's not once a year, it's throughout the year, and they look at ridership numbers and they look at things. Unfortunately, the way it is structured is if you are eligible for a bus, you have a seat. And yes, you could opt out, but a week later you could opt back in. So if all these people opt out and we take away that route, or collapse that route, and 10 of them come back a week, a month, 2 months later, we can't say no. So now we have to re-expand that route that we collapsed. So there's a lot that goes into it from that aspect.
And just based on the number, so even if you collapse some of the routes, everyone would still have a seat. They might have to sit next to someone instead of having a row by themselves, but everyone would still.
I mean, look, my kids go to Riverfield and we live on the other side of the post road, and we're on an 84 passenger bus with 3 to a row.
Yeah.
So our bus is packed. I see other buses that are empty and I envy them. But it's, when my daughter gets on the bus in the morning, she's looking for a seat because she's one of the last stops. And sometimes it's very hard to find a seat. So I hear what you're saying, but we also have to take into consideration that we do have to hold, if someone wants the bus, and doesn't say they don't want it, we've tried opt out and everything, and it just, people don't buy on. So maybe there's other ways that we're gonna explore to market that, and explain that it could potentially save. But yeah, with the routes, it's not something that goes unnoticed.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm gonna have someone come up, state your name and address, welcome.
And my name is Alice Simino. My daughter is a kindergartner at Burr Elementary. I'll put my name in a minute. I came here a few weeks ago, so nice to see everyone again. But the topic that I had 2 topics, but one of most importance, which is around school safety and security. As you probably have seen a lot on the news and certainly in the latest statistics, that this number of school shootings around the country have increased 3x since 2020. I think on January 23rd, I exchanged an email with Mr. Tostani on this very topic, asking what are we doing to increase security at schools, because Burr has a part-time security guard, but I'll caveat that in a minute, what that means. And on that same day that I exchanged an email with him, there was another shooting at a high school in Tennessee. And so this is not something like in the news we might read about, it's actually happening, and it happened not too long ago here in the state of Connecticut, and I hope it never happens again. And so I wanted to kind of address, particularly for Burr, but certainly for the other schools, like what does it take to increase full-time security staff, personnel at the schools? What other protocols do we have, and particularly for Burr, which is, as you all know, is a glass structure in the middle of the woods. It's not particularly safe. And I'll just say in the morning drop-offs and evening pickups, while there is a security button in the morning for drop-offs and pickups, anyone can come in. The doors are not guarded. I've walked in without anyone stopping me, without anything being pressed, and all to say is, my daughter's there and I have her best interest in heart. The question is, how do we
I'd like to jump in here and I appreciate your concern, you coming up to voice them. The Board of Ed has historically not discussed security arrangements in public. What I will say is that we have a very close cooperation with the Fairfield Police Department. We're in coordination with them on a regular basis on these matters, and we follow their lead.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'll just say on that one, I'll move to the second topic, but it's related to like, what does it take to fund it? I'm a parent happy to put in the money. I'm representing many parents, and in fact, in the 2 weeks since I've been here, there was a pretty extensive thread on Fairfield moms here asking these very same questions. So people want to know, and people are willing to pay the money to hire a full-time security guard. And I did some of my own back of the napkin mathematics, which for Burr would be an additional $150 per child to staff a full-time security personnel at the school. I'm happy to pay that and more to make sure we do it. So I guess I just want to like volunteer myself and other parents, like if it's a budget issue, that I'm happy to even support fundraising initiatives in the town of Fairfield to make it happen, because arguably security is our number one job like one for our staff and our students. So I'd like to offer my support there. The other is around communications. It's I guess maybe a program, if you will. For Burr Elementary School, but I know other schools, there's at least 4 applications by which communications from parents to students come through. And, you know, we all want to be really good Samaritans. Like we want to make sure we're participating and actively contributing to our students' education. And it's hard to do this when communications are coming through last minute or in a folder in the back of a backpack, or maybe it's an email, not actually an app, or. The point being is like we're clearly funding and spending money in our budgets to support these different applications, including even for the buses. And we've had buses show up that are either late, no communication, or an entirely different bus, not even like the same number. It was a different number. So parents are standing there wondering if they should put their children on that bus, and is it to the school? So all to say is like how are we thinking about communications applications and the rest of this? And still on the security side, I'd like to offer my help to fundraise.
Mr. Asa?
Yeah, with regard, I'm just gonna echo what Mr. Peterson said. With the security, if you've got suggestions or topics, I would suggest you reach out to the head of the SRO department and the Fairfield Police Department. And you can have a conversation with them. We can't go any more in depth on that here. The questions that you ask, I can assure you have been asked by board members, and we trust the Fairfield Police Department and what they say. They are the professionals. They know better than us. With regard to the apps, though, I just want to touch the bus tracking app is not one that we pay for. That is a free app that is offered through First Student. And the reason that you're getting those discrepancies, a lot of it ties back to what I mentioned before with driver shortages, and you are assigned a bus number. So if you have a substitute bus or a route is collapsed because of a driver shortage and another bus is coming, you will not see that on your app. The bus that is assigned to you is the GPS unit that is assigned to your app. That's why you're not seeing it come. So when you see another bus show up that's not on your app, you'll see yours looks like it's still at Reef Road. That's why. And as far as the communications with your school, I would highly suggest, talking to your principal. It always starts with going to your building principal and discussing any concerns you have about communications. We don't get into the weeds on those. Yes, we fund, an operating an infinite campus, and we now use Parent Square for dissemination of back and forth communication. But communication with your building principal is always the best place to start.
Can I just clarify, in the 2 apps you just mentioned, are those town funded?
The Infinite Campus,
So, yeah,
Yep.
Infinite Campus and Parent Square.
they're a part of our budget.
Okay, so is there a department that oversees
The IT
the
department.
simplicity of tooling and services like this?
Our IT department handles all of our.
Yeah, I work for a technology company, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to offer also our services to fix some of this, but
I'm gonna
Less is more
board
sometimes,
members, Ms. Flynn.
I can maybe give a little bit of color to the applications from kind of a parent perspective. So prior to my time on the board, I was actually the president of our PTA council. And we were heavy advocates for Parent Square prior to Parent Square being used. Infinite Campus was kind of the one-stop shop for that. Parent Square was really heavily modeled at a few of our elementary schools and then rolled out district-wide. So one bit of, I think, color that may be to that is our schools, a lot of things go on in our building. So while we have our administrators, as Mr. Ace said, I would start with your principal. One other piece of that may be how your PTA is using Parent Square or not. Are they still using a Facebook page? Are they still using email? Are they still using room parent email? So there may be different buildings that are utilizing that application quicker. And I will say, I believe it was Burr and McKinley that rolled out Parent Square first. I'm getting a few nods. And I think that it's only been 2 or 3 years of these applications. So I will say that I've seen, even I have children that are in elementary school and middle school, and just the variety of how those different buildings use them. So if you do have insight, I would also say to bring it to your PTA, to email us, to email our, like if there's, as we've said on different topics, parent input on this is really helpful. Like, are you missing the information from your PTA or your principal? That's 2 really different avenues. So maybe to start like filtering which information you're not seeing on Parent Square. So that may be a piece of
Actually
it.
the opposite. It's like too much information from too many sources, but like something simple, I just like went into the student profile for Parent Square. So you see the student, you see, by the way, you can refill their budget on food.
Yeah.
But you can't actually see their food menu because that food menu is an attachment in a PDF that gets communicated over email in another application. So all to say is like I think have too many horizontals.
Well, I would say, cause they're kind of not talking to each other. So our food service is totally separate.
Just an example, but
Yeah, like those are the little things where,
by the way, there's like a homework assignment tomorrow and your daughter like should present. You're like, oh, tomorrow? No one mentioned this. And by the way, it's like 7 p.m. on a Monday and Tuesday this assignment is due. So all to say is, I think parents want to do more, but it's hard to do this when you have 6 channels of communication. And I'd love to help, like if you mentioned there's this department similar to the like SRO department, I'd love to know who the contacts are. So I could and others who are eager to get involved can get involved, I suppose.
so you can go right onto our the Fairfield Public Schools, you can drop down to our departments and you'll see all the department heads. So we have a department head of IT, we have a department head for communications. So you can find all that right on the main page of the Fairfield Public Schools. Mr. Peterson.
Just very quickly, I'll point out that in our budget, in our proposed budget, superintendent's proposed budget was a transition to a program called Power School, away from Infinite Campus. And I believe one of the advantages of that was more streamlined communication system. We actually removed that from our budget because it was going to be a cost in the first year for implementation. There was a hope that in successive years, there would be less cost in terms of specialty coding that we would need to do to run reports. But we took that out again because of our budget crunch. So there may be something that we will revisit at some other point, but not.
Yeah, I'd love to help. I'll reach out to the IT department, but I'm curious to know if you use any cloud providers or like, I guess there are people who can make solutions also.
I'd suggest if you have communications like that, to go through the superintendent so he can route things. And if I can make a note for the audience, one of the things, and I don't mean to be a scold, the room is wired for sound, which is great and very helpful if you remember that we used to have to hold the microphones, but it picks up all the talking in the back. So like the public can hear all the, so I don't know if somebody's written into social media, but they often do. It's a gentle reminder about that.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out.
I'll let you go first before I do that. That wasn't for you.
Were you able to write your name and address on there, ma'am?
I did.
Perfect, thank you.
The next person that wants to come on up, just state your name and address and write it on the sign-in sheet.
Hi, everyone. My name's Frank Vaselli. I live at 84 Wagon Hill Road, father of a 5th grader at Osborne Hill. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak today. I've had the opportunity to exchange some communications via email as well as on Facebook on what has become a very hot topic for me, and it's just the policy change to busing. I have like 7 points. I'll go quick, and then I'll let you all answer. One, I just want to make sure people who are unaware, and I was unaware of this at the beginning of this process, how policy change happens. And if I just repeat it back and you guys tell me, do I got it right or not? Something comes to the board. You guys take it to policy subcommittee, vote on it, then it goes to finance, gets voted on. No? So it's really obtuse when you don't do this day over day like you guys do. So I'd really appreciate an explanation of how stuff happens. The second point is around timing, right? So I understand what was mentioned, which is, hey, you know, you guys are giving yourself a policy to give yourself the option to make a cut if you have to make a cut. But I understand that that is because the town in general is going through its budget cycle. So from, you know, I understand you guys have financial obligations to, if the first selectman's budget doesn't tick and tie with yours and you guys have to make cuts, it's time bound. But so when would, say, a parent understand if and when that policy is actually gonna happen or not? The third point is around safety. So thank you for your statement, and I understand that the policy doesn't say, hey, you know, specifically name Black Rock Turnpike or Post Road, but the way I understand the policy is written, it's like volume of cars during the commute and speed limit. So where I'm kind of concerned is we're chasing dollars here in some aspects. It does sound like it, and I know that because I read your guys' oath. Everybody cares about the safety of children. But like if we're chasing dollars, you know, and making policy amendments, just want to make sure there's no opportunity that that safety clause is going to be considered to make routes more available for walking. The other points I had were just, you know, an overall point. I think this goes for a lot of folks, working families in particular. Like this impacts everybody differently. And it just seems like because of the budget process and where you guys are, and I don't necessarily know if it's you guys driving the speed at this or not, that it seems really rushed. And I just feel like, you know, if you have the opportunity to say, hey, don't touch the budget, but like kind of under promise and over deliver, leave the budget for transportation fully funded. And if there's ways to do it down the road, great, but budget's a guidance. Once you make the cut, you're kind of beholden to it. I'd rather see that line in particular preserved, and then, you know, like I said, if there's a way to do it down the road, great, but like at least, you know, you're not forcing yourself into the cut. I was happy to hear that you.
If you
Sure.
start to wrap it up.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I have two more points.
Okay.
So I was happy to hear that there's other dialogue around options. And so I just wanted some clarity to understand when the next opportunity to talk about like more win-win options as opposed to win-loss, right? Like this feels like parents who are impacted are losing. So, you know, I'd love to hear some of the other kind of proposals around busing that have been floated. So you said that finance is next Wednesday, is that right? Okay. And then just one last question, you know, working in corporations, when there's a budget crunch, some of the first stuff to go is travel, entertainment, and training. And I know on page 70, there's about 190,000 of the budget. There's about 190,000 in travel and entertainment, and around 800. So the net number is about $1 million. So I'm just wondering, like, how much of that's mandatory? Like, I know like teachers probably need some certifications and you guys fund that, but like, is any of that discretionary, and could that be looked to be cut further?
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Ms. Maxon Cannelli.
Yeah, so first of all, how, in terms of, first of all, I love your question, chance to educate, in terms of how policy happens. Essentially, someone, and that is a huge swath of stakeholders, refers something to policy for consideration. A lot of the time it'll be staff. Staff will say, we're looking to make this staff change. It could be driven by state statute. It could be driven by, something in the district, that we're looking to improve something, update something, or what have you. Members of the public can come to the policy committee and say, would you be willing to take this on? I'll give you an example. This is the Sustainable Committee. This was about 3 years ago. Came to me to say, would you consider a sustainable policy? And I said, great, that's not my field of expertise. Can you do some homework on that? I know that it's taken them longer than they meant to, but they are on our list and have been on our policy agenda list of future items. I think about 1.5 years while they're trying to do some work and bring us something that represents, best practices. Or a board member might say, we're asking policy to consider, this type of a policy change. So basically just, I've been policy chair since 2011. I don't think I've ever said no. We've always been willing to look at it, and, hear the arguments, make revisions, I can't think of one that we haven't brought forward. Whether the board accepts it or not is a different matter. But the idea of the policy committee is we're gonna do the work. We're not trying to have 3 people make a decision for 9. We're 3 people who do the work of, whether it's commas or whether it's wordsmithing or whether it's we need more information to be able to present to the full board. So that's the work of the policy committee. And the vast majority of the time, once the policy committee does its work, it'll often be on the next regular agenda for the full board. There are a few exceptions. We just recently approved a couple of policies which we are holding until June, which aren't related to anything we're talking about right now budget-wise. But this transportation one is a perfect example of we passed it. We have no intention of asking for it to be put on the regular board agenda. We first wanted, as I said, we referred it to finance. Can you please work more? First of all, it also gives the public more chance to weigh in specifically on, what can be done here. But I don't think any of the 3 of us did that with the intention that it would come before the full board. Say the full 4.9 million got restored to us. I don't see this policy appearing on the agenda. I just don't. And so it will be part of this discussion. As I said, it was an option. It's one that 9 people are gonna be vested in saying ultimately yes or no to, or not having to grapple with it all if it's not a financial issue. So that's in terms of how policy happens. In terms of the timing of the budget, so as you know, the first selectman has presented his budget, and now the board of selectmen will do their wrestling and vetting and questioning this week, and then they have their vote. I don't know the day of their vote. Monday. So theirs is a down and dirty and get right to it. It's an all-day event for them. Obviously, the public can offer public comment when it's on the agenda. They have their vote, then it goes to Board of Finance, and they take a full month. They're not meeting every day on it. And again, department by department, vetting it, questions. So you've got the whole month of March, although I don't believe those meetings don't have public comment. Not all of them, I believe.
But they do have a public comment session on a Saturday.
Right, no, I know that, but the point is, for the month of March, the public can, in terms of you're wondering about the public tuning in. Definitely listen. You could be watching on FairTV. There will be that final Saturday in March at Ludlow at 9:30 in the morning, where it's the Board of Finance up on the stage, and it's the sole agenda item is the public coming up to make their case for anything in the budget that is of concern to them. The Board of Finance will then vote this following week. Then it goes to the RTM. Similar process. They have their presentations. They have their questions. And then they have their vote at the end of the month. I guess it's the first Monday in May, I think. And then that is when it returns to us. And so probably at that point, we would have gotten a kind of a clear sign of, are we looking at anything, small, medium, large? And then I think we'll pick up our level of work. Normally, we've done it in 2 meetings in May. The first one, we discuss possible things. The second meeting are when we do our amending and voting. I've never seen this size of a cut will obviously involve a great deal of wrestling. If it stayed hypothetically, if there seemed to be cause, unless we came up with some big ticket items, maybe we had a special meeting, who knows, depending on the nature of the conversation, but that's the timeline.
But just to recap, it's safe to say that there's no firm decision on this until that process plays out. And then when you guys get together back in May, then it's okay, you got to do something. Let's talk about the how.
Great point. So the Board of Selectmen are in the position to add, reduce, or stay the same. The Board of Finance, add, reduce, stay the same. The RTM, unless there is an appeal, can only reduce or stay the same. So the RTM is the location for please no more in general, but you're not gonna get it added back, or that would be a very rare circumstance where it is. So that was your question about the timing. In terms of safety being optional, I don't see it. We don't even deal with safety in policy. That is left to staff to do. We have a whole separate committee that Mr. Asa serves on, in terms of liaison to examine like they don't even make blanket statements. It's literally, you might be on a safe road, but that blind corner makes your stop unsafe. I'm not gonna get into it more than that because that's not my area of expertise.
Just a quick question there. So say routes come out, there's cuts. What is like an appeal process if, say, like from what I heard today, I'm not gonna be impacted, right? But at the same point, say a parent is, like, do they go to you guys? Is that like a subcommittee where?
I'll tell you what, could I just finish up my 2 points and then let Mr. Asa take it? No, that's fine.
To start wrapping up, because we're.
Well, there were a lot of questions, Ms. Follier, so I do, one comment I do want to make, and this is just an earnest plea to everyone who's listening and to the public, is the idea that this seems rushed. And I completely get your perspective on that. I can honestly tell you that there was very little about our discussion that seemed rushed to me, because we've been doing it. There have been topics that came up last budget cycle that have percolated all fall. And I just can't recommend enough for anyone who's tuning in now and saying this isn't such a bad thing to be a part of, volunteering to be the budget rep or the Board of Ed rep for your PTA is a huge difference maker, because then these things aren't, because what a horrible thing to wake up and say, wait a minute, they were just talking about what? Of course, and yet it wasn't a surprise. But I totally get that when you don't have some help and you're brand new to it, it's hard to stay tuned because there's so much going on when you've got young kids. So I'm not saying that judgmentally at all.
I get it.
I'm only saying if this can inspire anybody to, this is something you might want to do, I'll do my part for PTAs trying to recruit you.
I appreciate that 289 communications from Parent Square, and like, I haven't even seen one really about this yet. And I understand because it's not a done deal, but like, awareness is a huge part of this.
And that's usually been the role of the PTA. That's a huge part of it. I mean, we've got a couple of Facebook pages or others that have been trying to fill that void, and very grateful that those exist. But there's no question, everyone knows this, that there's a huge drop off in PTA involvement, but that used to be the way everybody found this out. And I don't have an easy solution other than to tap into people like you who, thank goodness, and thank you so much for showing up tonight. And I think that's other dialogue I think I've talked about. And the $1 million on travel, that doesn't sound remotely familiar to me, but I will certainly take, I think, a look at that, because I'm not sure what travel and entertainment our staff is getting.
190 travel entertainment, 800 on training, so that bucket of $1 million.
I don't think there's anything in this budget book, again, I'm gonna deal hypothetically with 4.9 million. I don't think there's anything in here that we're not gonna be going over with a fine tooth comb. But I'll defer to Mr. Asa.
Peterson?
I just want to say very quickly on the travel thing, I need to go back to this, but you may be partially, that number may be mileage allowances for people who go from school to school.
Okay.
So we have maintenance workers, teachers that teach at multiple schools.
Yeah.
So that all factors into that as well. So it's not,
Appreciate it.
anyway, please.
Just really quick for the, so I've been on the board since May of 2017, and I've been the safety liaison. To answer your question, if you have a concern, the first place you go is you contact the transportation department.
Okay.
So if you feel that you have an issue, you contact them. From my experience in that amount of time, I can't even count on, I don't even know how many, if any, instances that things like that haven't been resolved, either before it ever got to them.
Yeah.
Or so. So I can assure you that safety is always paramount. And I can also tell you that I do believe that the savings of 766,000 would have been even higher if they hadn't gone through and looked at those routes and looked at the Black Rock Turnpikes and looked at those areas and looked at the blind curbs. I mean, the Duck Farm Road was mentioned tonight, and there are, sidewalks in part of that area and everything. But, we heard during redistricting talks about how precious those walking zones are and how many people do walk.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get further up, it does become dangerous. And those things are looked at. So we're not putting kids in harm's way. And if we ever did have a situation that slipped through, you would contact transportation and then they would look at it. And if they deemed that they couldn't solve it or they completely disagreed with you, then it comes to the transportation safety.
Got it. Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, yep, just come on up, state your name and your address and also write it on the sheet there.
Hi, I'm Philip Levy. I currently reside at 574 Barlow Road. I have two children at Ward High School, a junior and a freshman. But I am a guilty Staples High School class of 1988. I came here as a previous living in Greenfield Hill. I was on the Sustainable Fairfield Committee for 3 years. I'm also part of the Electric Vehicle Club leadership of Connecticut. And for the past 8 years, I've been working on deploying AI into the built environment on and off of the grid, leveraging science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And built all together, they create incredible sustainability. You may be familiar with the project that's underway at Long Lots in Westport that aims to be 100% sustainable school and perhaps even have a layer of artificial intelligence in it with a small company called Techno, of which I am the founder of, have been for the last 8 years. So it's a pretty exciting time in technology and sustainability, but more so in teaching and education. And I've listened to many different parallel side conversations around security and transportation and silos, right? The exciting thing about this technology is it all works seamlessly together and it creates magic. So my reason for coming tonight is to offer my services. I'll be rolling out a sort of Hogwarts school for wizards. It's not a joke, it's real. And everybody's invited. And you know, the irony is your kids and your grandkids are already well ahead of you on this, even though you're policymakers. And that's not a knock, that's just the reality on the light speed technology has moved. And I'm doing my best to keep up with it. And so my mom grew up in this town. My kids are both at school here. And I just want to offer my services. So on a sidebar, there's a lot of Parks and Recs role to play here, right? Everyone has a role to play here. And there's so many beautiful mansions, castles, abandoned properties that can be brought back in a sustainable fashion, leveraging AI, that not only teach kids, but everybody involved in it. Call it the climate core, if you will, right? Similar to what the Peace Corps was. But when it's being set up and when it's finished and as it, you know, plays out, it becomes a little mini Coachella, not to take away from what happens at the beach, right? But this is a way to showcase the arts in a very dramatic fashion inside of the education department. So that's what I have to say. Any takers?
Thank you, Philip. Any comments on this? Ms. Maxon.
Well, just two quick questions. Have you spoken with either Mr. Cavano or Mr. Testani about what you're interested in being involved with?
Mr. Cavana and I was actually judging the DECA competition at school last week, so we haven't had the formal conversation. I figured why not come here first, but yeah, I'm happy to have that conversation with him.
And secondly, because we'll be having at some point in the not too distant future, a building committee forming, you know, and if that's a level at which you're interested in getting involved, that is a priceless contribution, right, Mr. Lee, a priceless contribution to the school district to have knowledgeable people volunteer again and again.
There's a lot of us out.
Building committees.
So thank you for sure. Happy to. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you, Philip.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Oh, just one more thing.
Yeah, you've got time.
Conserve energy. There's a house in Westport. It won the Westport Green Building of the Year award. It's house number 227 Hills Point. And I just use Apple Intelligence to put that house into a low state of power while all day it's been using energy by the sun that's storing it in a battery that's charging an electric vehicle that's gonna pick me up later and bring me to my electric bike so I can play some music downtown. So.
Thank you. Who else would like to come up and speak? Hello.
I have my list, everybody. Elaine Thomas Davis, 206 Farmington Avenue. First of all, there was a fabulous a cappella concert on Friday night. Cheers to Sarah Hofer, Bob Hughes, Kathy Gabriel, and all of the magnificent conductors. Please don't touch the music budget. It is fantastic, and our kids are just thriving in it. Please consider delaying the purchase of world language textbooks as the curriculum is not approved yet. This could be a $300,000 savings to the budget. The teachers are just doing an amazing job without these textbooks. Restorative training. Why can't we use in-house trained instructors instead of contracting out? We have some really qualified in-house restorative trainers in this town. Let's use them. Chromebooks. Parents who do not carry the insurance that the district offers should be liable for Chromebook repairs if their children break them. There was an example just the other day where a student dropped and broke his Chromebook, and he said, "Write to me. I'm not gonna pay for this. My parents aren't gonna pay for this," and walked away. Parents should be made liable. I can think of how much money do you think we can save if parents who didn't carry the insurance paid for the repairs on the Chromebooks? Gifted talented. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that parents ever agreed to the transportation bus. It's a great program. We can just leave it as is and save some more money that way. Reinstate, have you considered reinstating February vacation? That would be a great way to help reduce absenteeism, as both staff and students would benefit from the natural pause in the academic schedule. With week-long February break, families would also have adequate time to travel with their children, reducing the number of school days students are likely to miss. I know of one school, there were 60 absences the day before 14th. The idea of having a February break would support the state and district policies in place to help to reduce habitual absenteeism. Thoughts, comments, questions?
Thank you, Ms. Flynn. Thank you. Having worked in a district that continued to have February break, this is something that I've thought of back and forth also in terms of illness. You know, we always heard clearing the building for a week was always a good way to get the flu up and moving, which I'm sure a lot of parents right now are dealing with. I know my family got hit twice. But I do think it's interesting when you talk about the absentees that catty corner our long weekends and how we kind of structure those. So I think going into the calendar next year, that's definitely something that I would want to see. On top of that, we have a lot of obligations that we're trying to meet in terms of holidays, PDs. So I just worry that even with that kind of movement, we're still kind of trying to hit a moving target that's getting longer and longer, justifiably. But I think that there's a lot of needs when we talk about those calendar days. So I very much agree. And I think that we probably are seeing those upped absentee rates because families are trying to travel, go see colleges, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's a good point. Thank you. Jacobson.
Hi, we recently discussed policy around school calendar and we're getting a lot of requests for more holidays. Kind of settled on this idea, there's gonna be a start date and there's gonna be a finish date. What happens in between is what happens, which means if you wanna take more days off, then you're gonna have to cut something else back. We're not just gonna add on, right? We have a lot of schools too that are not fully air conditioning and schools that don't have any. So warmth, and we've got 3 levels in certain buildings as well. So that's one issue is if you're gonna take more days off in the middle, you're gonna have to give up Veterans Day or give up other holidays or take other things off the calendar. There was a point in time where we're just adding on and on and on and on to the end of the year, and that's just not good. Also, I will say for older kids, the APs don't get moved based on our February calendar. So every day that you take away before the beginning of May is a day less they're prepared for their AP exams. So that's always a condition for our older kids, right? Our kids who are taking AP exams. It more aligns with other states who get out of school like a month earlier than Connecticut does. So that is a factor to to consider on that issue as well. So those are some of the things that have come up in those conversations. I know everybody likes this idea of adding another, having the full week off. I totally understand it, but it's not as simple for like a high school kid as much as it is as an elementary kid. And then there's all these issues pertaining to our buildings. The restorative training, I think that's something we can follow up with that in terms of, I can't remember what we put in the budget for that. But that's a good idea to follow up on. And the Chromebooks, we already do have policy about damage to the Chromebooks. So there is policy on that in terms of being liable for coverage if you don't have it. So we do have policy on that. I mean, obviously I think it might be difficult to prove, like if it was an egregious, intentional, and we could look into how much are we recouping from that? Right. How much is that enforced, so to speak, or not thereof? So good ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone want to answer music, world language textbooks, or gifted and talented? Ms. Betsy? I'm happy to jump in. In terms of the delay of the world language textbooks, that's something that we've already addressed as a different rollout for world language. Just want to remind the public that's listening today that the world language curriculum has not yet come to our board for approval. We also do not have a date that we're expecting that. That's something that we should have received already last fall. I didn't support the purchase of the world language textbooks because it was out of order for me. And it'll be interesting to see when and if that curriculum comes back to us. Regarding gifted and talented, that came to us for a first read. I've requested through the chair that come back to us for vote, and it's not on the agenda. So stay tuned for these items because they're important and they will affect this budget. I mean, gifted is in this budget, but we haven't approved it. World language is in this budget, we haven't approved it. So these are, stay tuned for this. So the other thing, music, yes, let's not touch it because the arts are always at risk. And we have to do our best to advocate for them always. So thank you for being here to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next person, just state your name and address.
Good evening, Amanda Campbell, 856 Riverside Drive. Thank you for your time tonight. I have found this listening session very informative and very helpful. I hope you all have as well. You've invested a lot of time. In particular, thank you for the educational posts on Facebook and other medium. I read one that you did tonight, Ms. Jacobson. That's really great for us to get grounded in the process, and the over communication is just communication, and it's great. I have a couple thoughts, couple questions. On the bus service in particular, it's been raised a couple of times, but just a couple of ideas. Could you do an AM bus but not a PM bus? Could you get rid of the afternoon activities buses from the middle school and high school? For a working family household, that AM bus is crucial for us. The PM bus, that 1.5 miles downhill in the afternoon doesn't seem as daunting as a 7 a.m. hike up a hill. Could there be a nominal fee? I guess you're looking at that. Could you give people a $25 cafeteria credit to opt out? Get people to opt out, a little incentive. If you're not using the bus, maybe you can buy lunch for a week or two. Some other thoughts, just in no particular order. I saw there was an expectation of federal funds. I imagine those are perhaps in jeopardy or in flux. And I wouldn't want us to go through this exercise and feel good about the budget and then all of a sudden not receive federal funds. So I wanted to just put that on the radar and make sure that that's being thought through as we craft the budget. Couple of other questions I had. I noted in the superintendent's budget that we're saving a lot by in-housing, creating some efficiencies with our special education, although the cost of our outreach is still really high. I'm wondering if more can be in-housed or if we could partner with neighboring districts on a consortium of special education offerings where we're paying one another or charging one another rather than a school that's either for profit or charges a really high tuition to us. And if that's been explored. PE, as you said, the arts are always in jeopardy. I know that we have art that's been sliced before in recent years. Our music program at times Have we looked at PE hours? I'll speak for my own family. All of my kids do after-school sports. Most families in Fairfield do. I'd rather us look at PE hours rather than art or music or Spanish or STEAM, because we're not doing a lot. I know some of it's required by state law, but I don't know if we are over what the state law requirements are. It looked like 20 minutes a day for elementary when I looked it up quickly. Could there be a greater recess as opposed to, PE hours? School aftercare, is that a place where we could get money or tuition? I think right now we outsource it, but could it be provided by the district and then teachers could be compensated and it could offset somehow? I know every elementary school does it differently. I pay $500 a month for before and after care. It's not provided through the school. Could it be provided through the district? The same with after school specials or extracurriculars. Is that a way to offset some of the school budget by charging parents for classes after school rather than sourcing with private sector options? I work in the private sector. Whenever we have a budget cut, we go to the people who are in charge of those buildings, of those facilities. I pretty much will do anything that Meg Tiley tells me to do, so to the building super, the principals to say, have you looked at this budget? We need you to find 5% to cut here. They may be closest to the source and could give you an easy or not so easy, but maybe creative way to save some money. So just a thought there. I'll wrap up. I guess my final thing, this is in a budget year, it's not, or a tough budget year, it's not great to ask for things. I'll just flag that I have one student at RLMS and one student at Sherman. Sherman, we have a trailer on site, a portable that's not habitable, but we don't want to get rid of it because if we do, there's a wetlands concern about if it's taken away, you can't replace something. We don't have a dedicated computer lab. Anytime the students use the computers, the other students don't have library. There's a need to replace a portable. It could become a full-time classroom because the portable that exists there's two portables. One's in use, one is not usable. And so I would just flag for your attention that that's an issue that we're working to resolve. But when looking at enrollment numbers as well as the demands of the building itself, it might need to be replaced.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Kretschmann.
We'll start right there
Yeah.
with Sherman. Was actually in portable recently.
The one that's used as storage?
The one that's being used for classrooms.
Okay.
And to be honest, it's nicer than some of our other facilities.
That's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the one that's used as storage. Because it can't be inhabited.
I understand. We have a lot of expenses right now, a lot of building and facility needs. We have some buildings that don't have AC. It's really hard to get into a building or change a storage facility when there's schools that don't have AC. So we're in a tough situation here. We have to pick and choose a lot of times. And if we could give everyone every single thing they wanted, I'm sure we would, but we can't. So you just gotta understand that everyone's dealing with something at every school and we're just trying to balance that.
Sure.
It's not that we're trying to ignore people's asks, it's just, we have to kind of set priorities of what really needs to happen for a full school, the next priority, and we have lists, massive lists that we go over all the time, facilities. You're more than welcome to come and talk to in a meeting and explain the problems a little bit more, but there'll be a lot of big issues that we gotta address first.
Thank you. Ms. Flynn.
Hi, thank you so much for your questions. I did want to pull up in our budget book, again, our revenue on page 155, it lists all of our federal revenue. And in there's a few that don't necessarily hit the district, so it's somewhere in the 2.3-ish million, maybe a touch more. And then we also have our federal funding for free and reduced lunch, which is in a totally different bucket. I actually believe it's in the agriculture bucket. But just like you, it's something that has not occurred. It's something that I'm thinking about. I think it's something that we all need to be paying attention to. And I don't think it's something necessarily that we as a board and a municipal level can plan for. But I will say that it is a large number. So we're already seeing a $4.9 million reduction from the first selectman, if we were to add on top of that a federal reduction, it would be impactful. I'm gonna use that word right now and then we'll see where we are, but it's definitely something that I know that I'm thinking about and I would encourage people to be thinking about as well.
Silly.
Thanks for coming out. I think when you talk about eliminating that PM bus, I think that when you're talking about working families, that bus is crucial also for those kids, for those after school programs that are committing themselves, for whether it's a practice or a club or something like that. I think that's, if anything, is talking about kids that possibly participate in sports, they're wrapped up after practice, right? The best comfort is to get back on the bus and get home and get in, and I think that wouldn't be fair for just you have an AM bus, but by the way, if you decide to stay after school and participate in something, we can't help you out, we can't bring you home, and I think that it can be discussed, obviously, I wouldn't be exactly in support of something like that. Just for that factor, right? You talk about the working mom, they can time it, that's after school program and time to home when they're home. So I think that's something that we could look at it. I don't know if it would be something that would be possible.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobson.
Hi, thanks for coming out. I was actually interested in going through the ridership data to see that a majority of our elementary schools, the ridership is actually higher in the afternoon and in the morning. Not by a lot, not at Sherman, but at least on the good days.
I'm not speaking about Sherman busing. We're walkers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were talking about AM and PM buses and it was an interesting fact to note that there was actually more ridership in the afternoon on the good days. And even on the good days, it's not that good, but and we can't like pick and choose like that. If you are eligible for a bus, you're eligible for the bus, period. We can't, say, well, we're only gonna give it to you in the morning and in the afternoon you can't have it. So we can't do that. The only option literally at this point is obviously to look at some of the ideas, right? Is there other ways to be more efficient? But the only option that this board actually has is the distance on that. And of course, working with the bus company that I know Mr. Papa George and I know Ace has been involved in some of that, but just looking at those routes obviously is an efficiency. Some of your other ideas about outplacements or running our special ed programming. Yeah. So we do run a big number of in-house programming that has significantly helped us bring down our number of outplaced kids. I'll see if you guys watch the superintendent's presentation tomorrow morning at the Board of Selectmen, you'll probably see that in there. The issue with is even though we have declining numbers of kids that we're outplacing, the schools do not have any limitations on how much they can raise their tuition. That is something that we are dealing with or trying to get addressed at the state level, something called rate setting. There is a bill to do that, but it wouldn't hit until probably at earliest 27, 28. So I'm gonna advocate that they hurry that up a little bit more. Because as we have number of kids going down, the cost is still going up because there's no limitation or cap, so to speak, or even some sort of a formula for the school. So it's like inverse. So that's an issue that we're having on that. I will say, we did look at some other out of district options, just tying in some of these things where other people come here or go elsewhere. A lot of people don't want their kids going out of district for things. We looked for ECC space out of district, but there was concern about that families would not want their children leaving school. People talked about Walter Fitzgerald. It's been advertised for years. And other districts are starting their own alternative high schools because it's the same feeling, right? Like if they can stay in with their siblings or they can stay in home, that's what people really value and want. I'm not saying that that's not an option in terms of consolidating space. And again, there's more legislation about all of this because the state is really interested in helping districts build the programming. I'd like to see them help us who already have it. So they're incentivizing developing some of those programs, but I'd like to see districts that are actually doing this get some support on that too. The other complication with more programming is that you need the space. I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but we have the equivalent of roughly a small elementary school of special ed programming going on in our district. So when you say we've got 11 schools, you could technically say we've got 10. because we've got enough classrooms in play here of a small elementary school that's operating as the 11th. So I think it's great that we offer in-house programming. We're continuing to expand that. It is a huge cost avoidance on our operating budget, 16 million and change just this year, 16.75 million last year. That would otherwise be in the budget if we didn't have that. But there is a cost to run them, and there's also a facility side to that. I wish we got capital credit for what's not in here for that. In terms of what we need for building space, but that's a conversation with other people. So just a few of my thoughts on your ideas.
Just a follow-up question on that. When you say that people would prefer to stay in their district, but the outplacements are not.
I mean, that's a PPT issue, and I'm not talking about that. I'm saying, like, when we've been told before, Walter Fitzgerald, like, that's open, like, people can come and they can pay tuition. Other districts could utilize that resource, but yet they're opening their own. Because I feel, I don't know, I just feel like families want to, as much as possible, and if possible, stay in district. Yep.
Thank you. We're at 13 minutes, but there's a lot of good questions, so I don't know what the feeling is among the board. I know Mrs. Kennelly and Mr. Lee has answers, so.
Mine's quick. I just wanted to take a positive spin on your list, because what you've done is what we're hoping the public will do. And I know, like, there's a lot of things we keep saying no to, and yet maybe some of these are things we're gonna have to open up our mind and say, well, wait a minute, I mean, for example, and Mrs. Jacobson, correct me if I'm wrong, I actually think if we wanted to, we could have 2 different distances for AM and PM. What we can't do is exceed the state mandate. We couldn't say you get an elementary school if you're a quarter of a mile away, and you only get it if it's 1.5 miles. We could say AM is 3/4, PM, I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that what I appreciate and what we're hearing from everybody tonight is we're gonna need creative ideas or things that maybe the 9 of us, because we are only 9, haven't thought of. So I appreciate those ideas. Again, I'm while on the one hand I say I'm not a fan of losing activity buses, needless to say, we need to take a look at the ridership on that. Is that proving to be important? I liked the idea of the nominal fee. I wish we could bribe people to opt out. I know that I thought there was a conversation at the high school if you wanted a parking spot, opt out kind of thing. I don't know. I can't remember what ended up happening with that. The outplacements, that's always a good area for us to possibly take a look at. PE is definitely one we've brought up. Our last major budget cut of 2.1 million, that was definitely an area that we looked at. School aftercare, interesting top, but one of the most important things you said, and this will be behind the scenes and it won't be for the public to see. I have no doubt that Mr. Testani is going to his staff saying, start examining your buildings. So much better if a principal can come forward, him or herself, saying, look, we can do this better. We can do this more efficiently. We have an idea here. And while that'll be a messy process. I don't expect that all to come half-baked to the board, but I have to believe that Mr. Testani is doing that. Now that things are official, we obviously just got the budget numbers this weekend. I am sure that he is doing that, and that'll be things that we haven't even thought of yet. But again, I do appreciate hearing about Sherman as well, by the way. I didn't realize that the situation was as it was there. That wasn't even on my radar, so I appreciate you putting it on my radar.
Mr. Lee?
I think I just wanna stress one thing, cause I got here a little late, but I can see there's a theme with transportation. I think one comment that Mr. Ace said very early at the beginning, when it comes to opting out, every parent can opt out if they want, but life changes and stuff, and they have the right to opt back in, right? We have to give them a bus, and I think that's something we have to keep in our heads and remember too.
Thank you. Did you write your name on the list? I did.
You did, yeah.
Great, perfect. Okay, go ahead and state your name and your address.
Hi, I'm Sean Hood, 420 Lally Boulevard. I am a mom to a 5th grader and a kindergartner. I am kind of speaking to the board on behalf of what I would hope to be parents who are concerned for elementary school programming. Like Amanda, I really believe that we should try and continue and preserve as much as possible for the beginning years of our students, especially at this time for science and technology. So the idea or concept that STEAM could be on the chopping block is a real red flag for me and something we should consider, with the utmost understanding that it's absolutely critical that kids at this age learn math, science, and technology at this age. I also would reiterate what Amanda had said about Sherman. We are lacking a computer lab. We are lacking the space for kids. And so when you hear a lot of this conversation about maybe changing the age for Chromebooks, maybe getting kids not to have them so soon, I think it's really important to remember that one, not everyone can afford a computer at home. Two, in order to do testing, most of these kids need their Chromebooks to do the testing. So you can't have no Chromebook access and the same level of testing that we're currently performing. And lastly, I think just from a parent perspective, I don't think I realized that by opting out of the bus, I mean, again, I'm not eligible for a bus, that I could be saving the district money. So I think it's time that we push better messaging to parents saying, we are in a budget crisis. We need to be making cuts. Can you consider the following and make it really clear and really available for people to see? Because I don't think it's known. And as a PTA member, even this meeting, there's 23 people in this room who are participating. Yes, there are people online, but there's 23 people in this room when we're talking about the budget needing at least a $4 million cut on top of a budget that was asking for an additional $6 million. So realistically, we're talking about massive program cuts across the school district, and there's 23 people in this room. Why is that? People are disengaged, people aren't caring. So how can we re-engage the community? I think we need to really spend some messaging direct from the Board of Education saying the Board of Education is making program cuts. That is what we're doing. You know, I'm at Sherman, my daughter's in a class of 3 kindergartners that have 23 kids in them. There are classes at other schools that in kindergarten have 14 and 15 kids in them. We're talking about resourcing being fair. It's not fair for 2 classes of 14 and 15 to sit across from a town that has 3 classes of 23. We have to have hard conversations, and we have to talk about facilities and using them optimally, no matter how people feel about their neighborhood schools. And I understand that's very unpopular, but the reality is something has to change because we need to lose money that we're spending because we don't have money anymore.
Thank you. Representative Guernsey. Hi, thanks so much.
This is Guernsey.
Easy. Thank you so much for your comments. And I just wanted to sort of respond a little bit to like the process part because you know, everyone that sits at this board brings with them a different history. So my kids are like high school and college age. So I've seen this process a lot of times, right? So we have people that are in the audience that have like younger kids. This is newer to them. So like we want to meet everyone where they are, but this is really difficult because we've already done our job. We passed the budget. So the issue is how do you collectively get that message out to the community about what they need to do next? What are the steps? Because we can work on our end on preparing for cuts, but the reality is we don't even know what we're preparing for. We've done our job. So of course we continue to advocate for it. So, you know, the onus of this kind of is difficult because it shifts like, if you want to hear from us, we've already told you what we want to do, right? This is our statement, is the budget. So, you know, and that's, you know, that's fine. But I think to Samantha Finelli's point, the idea that we are missing these critical components that have worked for us in the past around PTA council representatives, PTA representatives, these are the people that traditionally have done this work, right? And they've communicated this to the public and we're missing it. So I'm speaking around people here, you're all here, right? But how do we get that message out? That's a question for you, right? That I would challenge you with, because I'm not sure what else I can do. I mean, I can scream all day long from here. This is my pulpit, but I have just my singular community. So
does the BOE send out the budget to the parents?
It's posted on our website.
But is it a push saying the BOE has finalized the budget? Here's what we expect in like 3 bullet points. I mean, I know it's in the news, I know it's in the patch, but does it go to the parent?
Ms. Flynn.
Yeah, if you track back, the communications department does send out, there were notices about our budget meetings. The budget was posted. One thing that I will say,
like I'm talking about.
No, the answer is no.
No, it doesn't go to the parents. And I know it's posted, but I'm just saying, is this one, you guys have control over, not you, FPS has control over the communications. We don't have that.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I can jump in. one of the challenges with this, and this is something we've struggled with for years, is we're a public board and we have certain rules. And as chair, have some flexibility to speak on behalf of the board, but if we're gonna put out a statement on social media about where we are, what this is, like, it would have to be approved by us. So it's a clunky process to make that happen. Now, we do have, a person who works with the administration who does social media postings, and she's been great, and I think that's been very helpful, but actually missives coming from the Board of Ed directly are kind of difficult to organize, just because we are a public body of 9 members. And, if we wanted to put out a 9-0 vote on a statement for something to put on social media, it gets very difficult to do that.
I just think from our seat as a member of Parent Square, I received information about Happy Mother's Day from my principal, which was lovely, and I appreciate that. Can I surely also get the budget by the board has been approved, here it is, the town, you gotta look to the PTA. I really gotta, I was a Board of Ed rep for Stratfield PTA, and it was a gateway drug to this whole experience. But there were things, I happened to go to a committee meeting that was one of the first when they discussed the middle school enrollment reorientation about 15 years ago. And so I was able to give my PTA, hey, they're gonna move us from Ludlow to. yeah, no, listen, as a PTA member, I understand. I also.
But people,
get.
it's hard. I think that this, the whole streaming it has made it a little too easy. I'm not putting it on anybody. What we do here is complicated, and it's so hard to keep tabs on. And I know a lot of us individually try to make social media postings and talk and go even visit PTAs, but it's got to be a two-way conversation. If you're on the PTA, I would hope that your PTA budget rep or PTA or Board of Ed rep would send out emails to PTA people at your school saying this is what's going on. I think that's a link in the communication that I think is really missing.
Mr. Asa.
Yeah, and on face value, I love the idea that you have, send this out. But one of the other things that we hear from people is that they get so many communications that they don't even pay attention to them. And your point that there's 23 people in the audience here tonight, when we're facing this, yeah, I mean, we could send it out and simply, as Mr. Peterson said, we can say, here's the Board of Ed passed budget, please take a look. But the reality of a vast majority of people going through hundreds of pages of a book so I'm not discounting what you're saying, but I think the points to the PTA is, and I've been involved with our PTA at our school for years, it's the number of people that come out is dwindling, the engagement is dwindling. So I think it's time for, as a collective group, to figure out how to re-engage people and use those avenues.
I don't think the PTA venues are working anymore, because I am crafting the emails that are going out to the PTAs to drive this engagement, and we are facing the same issues. So I just think, I understand that it's not your job to engage the community, and the community does have to step up. I just think that people are uneducated in the reality of what is at front of us right now, which is a real budget cut and real programs being cut. And they're gonna have the same reaction that we did with redistricting, which is at the very last minute, 10,000 people complaining about a short runway where they should have known it for 10 years. And I just want to figure out a way that we can come together and say that we want this, we're gonna get this. We have to make cuts. Can you tell us you won't make a bus? Can you tell us that you're gonna take the hand costs off PTA and let them buy, pay more? Can, Ludlow, athletes have more booster clubs? I mean, that's the reality of what we're looking for, is how we can allow our programs to remain by subsidizing from the community that wants to pay for it.
Mr. Krasnoff, did you want?
Aye, Mr. Asa covered.
Ms. Mexicanelli, you had your hand up?
I already forget my point. But no, I just, one point that you just said, because we heard it earlier. And one thing, this is a very minor point, but just to be aware of, because this is something we've wrestled with in policy, but when it comes to tapping our parent community for paying for things, we have to be, and this is where the board has to be the bad guys sometimes on that. We do have an equity issue. We can't let one school start providing tens, $20,000, $30,000 worth of things for their school. And then the board has an obligation to say, all right, well, great that you raised that. Now we have to do it for these other schools. And guess what? We don't have the money for that. So just that, like, that's a perfect example of. That said, I'm gonna repeat what I said earlier. I love the thinking, and I do wanna acknowledge that you're one of the people who has stepped up as PTA leadership. You know, you put your money where your mouth is. You've tried to engage. So I wanna thank you for that. But it's just, you know, some of the things are harder. You know, if we're gonna do it in one place, we've gotta do it in both. If it's gonna happen at Ludlow, we have to be able to do it at Ward. If we're going to do it at Burr, then you gotta be able to do it at Holland Hill. And so those things, that's another factor. That's kind of the 9-person view that we have to take of some issues.
We're getting over again, so just real quickly, Ms. Flynn.
Similar to Mr. Peterson, PTA was kind of my runway for this work, and we were all part of a community that kind of dealt with COVID, coming back into being together again. And one thing that I've noticed that has been incredibly successful in PTA, and something that I actually kind of deeply miss working in a group of 9, that we get to work at this table together, but outside of it, we are one, is that collaboration across schools. And one thing that I think I saw pretty quickly was there wasn't gonna be a budget rep from every school. It just wasn't happening anymore. So what you would find is, hey, do we have one good middle school budget rep who's willing to share her notes? Do we have one, I see them, because we see them in the audience, one really good elementary rep who is willing to share? And this is where PTA Council is kind of like a little hub, and where everyone can kind of find a place that if this isn't working, and we've seen the model, we've seen the green teams who said, this wasn't working when we were alone, but if we consolidate, this will work together. We see it that when we are all together and all the schools are working as a unit of 11 or a unit of 3 or a unit of 17, things seem to get disseminated better. So I would continue to just arc to people to volunteer where you can, and if you don't have all the time, to look to the people who are kind of doing something in a similar lane. So I think there are really good people still showing up, it's just not in the volume.
So maybe you should be listing those PTAC members or people who are making good notes to the general public who want to find them, because again, like I don't know who's good at making BOE rep notes.
I would say to
I don't have them access, but you guys know who they are because they're at your meetings.
I would say email our PTA council president, maybe she can get you a list, or our PTA council budget rep, I think that they may have a list. I think and believe me, I'm happy to help. Email me, I think I could connect you to those people, but once you have those contacts, we do have people doing the work. So I think it's important to continue connecting with each other as parents and talking to each other. Come to us and do that as well, but.
Mr. Cressman.
Just wanted to piggyback on what Ms. Max Kennelly said. In terms of ways, you might not be able to do fundraising, but if you believe in the budget we passed, you can go to other town bodies and have them keep the budget the way it is. It may be a small tax increase, but that's the way that you can still donate funds to the fact that we want to keep the budget the way it is. Now, maybe you don't agree with the budget, and that's a way, you know, you can also go about it, is tell them how you don't agree with the budget. But if you're afraid of programs being cut, it's promote that you want us to keep the budget the way it is.
You, real quick.
As she's walking away, Sean, I just want to thank you for bringing this, because I think it's time that we need to think outside the box and figure out how to re-engage the public. So I think this is sparking a conversation that needs to continue. And we need to, as a group of the people that show up here and the people at this table, figure out some new and innovative ways to do it. So I'm all for that.
Can I throw one thing out there? Here's one thing I want to say, and I'm gonna say it to you and to anyone else who's listening. One interesting opportunity we have coming up right now, March parent-teacher conferences. If the PTA could organize something with those, that there's someone who's knowledgeable about what's going on with the Board of Ed to be present as all of those parents are coming in the buildings, that's a thought.
Thank you. Hello, just state your name and address and write it on the list.
Jeff Cavalier, 220 Wellington Drive. That doesn't work.
I'll get you another one.
This word, I got it. Thank you, everybody. I actually never come to one of these before, so I'm certainly new at it. And I'll try to keep it quick. I did like the suggestion made last time about the push notifications rather than always pulling to the website. I think that has become a lot easier these days. I think to disseminate, but also like in terms of the summarization of that big long report that no one's gonna wanna watch. We had a gentleman speak earlier today about AI, like that's pretty darn simple these days to summarize a 200-page document into the main points that people would probably wanna know and hear about. With a simple ChatGPT entry, we could probably do that just like that. So I think there's ways we can summarize and make that more efficient. My concerns here today, what I actually just simply want to put out to the board was, what are your, the board's opinion or impression on the adequacy of funding for special education and human resources, specifically at a school like Mill Hill, where my sons go, where there seems to be staffing issues daily, high turnover rates and high importance positions like special education teachers, disproportionate ratios of children to staff, and major problems in that school in particular, but that it seemed to be district wide, that I think have a lot to do with funding issues. So I just wonder what the board's opinion is on that and what the plan is to help in that regard.
Ms. Maxon.
Well, I'll just say that one of the things that's not on our agenda for this meeting, I'm sure Spolier, Mr. Peterson was probably about to say this, but is personnel. So I don't think there's much there that would be appropriate for all of us to jump in on. What I will say in general is that, of course, you're absolutely right. There are definitely shortage areas that we are struggling with as a district. That's one of the reasons we passed the teacher contract that we did, was to try to be able to retain quality staff. But to some of the specific issues that you're saying, I can only recommend that you go to your principal first. And if that seems to be something that is not a successful avenue of communication, you don't have to stop there. There is the chain of command, and you can take that up, to central office here and keep inquiring if there's an issue in your building specific. But
the issue is that central office has heard these issues and claims that everything is fine. Staffing and, well, funding is fine. Funding is adequate. But meanwhile, when there's no one there, then what is the issue?
I think we're gonna have to confine that discussion to within the chain of command rather than here.
We don't get involved
Yeah.
with personnel. Unfortunately, that's not in our scope. Sorry to jump in.
No, you.
But part of the role of the board is not the daily management of the district. We actually don't know the details of that, and there's a reason for that outside of our statutory.
Impacted a lot by funding.
Well, as what you're saying is the people aren't there. The district isn't telling you that they don't have money to pay for them. But as Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly was saying, there are shortage areas, there is turnover. That is something that every district around here is struggling with. And we're doing, I believe our administration is doing their best to fill those roles. But that's the most I can discuss about it.
Sorry, Jeff.
Can I just follow up? I'll finish up with that. Broadly speaking, outside the personnel issue that we don't get into there, I don't think there's been anything for special education that we haven't funded that's come to this budget. And then actually a lot of funding overages that cause deficits in the budget is because those are like volatile items sometimes, and they do cause deficits. So they actually go over budget on a regular basis. So just from a budget standpoint on special ed, not only do we fund whatever has been asked, I can't actually remember anything that wasn't funded for special ed that was requested, plus the overages that occur in that department.
I mean, I think that the reason why there's likely a lot of overages is because potentially it's underfunded, but that's my opinion. Like if we're regularly going over.
Well, like we had that example in tuition many years ago. It was not properly funded, the tuition for outplacements. And even the Board of Finance and other boards were like, you gotta properly fund it because it's causing deficits in the rest of the budget, right? So to your point, overages can be a signal that it's not properly funded or it's underfunded per se. So that is an area that we have looked at for sure.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
My name is Eva Alfa. I'm a mother of three. Two are in the school district. My son is second grade. And my daughter just entered kindergarten in Mill Hill. This is one of my first Board of Ed meetings. I'm very new to this. I'm just trying to wrap my head around how everything works.
Sorry, can you make sure to write the name and address down too?
And it's a very interesting. I did have an idea just listening to people, and this is random, and I don't know if this would work, but it seems to me that there's a lot of very capable people in this district. And I hate to believe that there is not a parent in the district that wouldn't jump at the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm gonna take over helping the Board of Ed with some like PR, like spreading the news, getting things out, kind of being like a designated PR volunteer rep almost. I think there are very capable people here that would be happy to do that and kind of just gather all the information, throw it on an Instagram page or social media or email and kind of try to help the board spread the news, if that is an issue. I don't know if that's something that's even possible like that.
Does anyone want to answer that? Ms. Flynn?
So there were some other questions.
Oh, okay, I was, I didn't know. Go ahead.
The other question, just trying to wrap my head around it, trying to understand how things work. There is an alarming amount of parents that I have become aware of that are, for lack of a better term, very taken back by the fact that the IEPs were changed without the parents' consent in terms of the language regarding one-to-one pairs being replaced towards adult supervision. So there's a number of parents that are very concerned about that, and I'm trying to wrap my head around how something like that works. Is that something that is part of the Board of Education cuts? Do those directions come from the Board of Education, or are those individuals within the district taking those steps upon themselves? Like, how does something like that work?
So I would say, like, as with the previous question, decisions about educational delivery are the province of the administration and the buildings. These are not things that the Board of Ed deals with at all.
Yeah, because my concern about that was when you have these parents that feel like things are they're being done wrong, right? They hire an attorney, then they go to the district, and the district is going into a legal battle. That's very expensive, right? Avoiding those kind of situations is a key factor. And I know that a lot of the people that don't have special needs kids feel like, you know, we need to cut the special ed spending budget, or there's like a lot of waste there. And I want to caution people when they think about those things, it's sometimes you get mistaken by thinking, you know, if that child doesn't have a one-to-one para, then we're saving money. But those kind of things kind of trickle down, right? Then that child may not have a one-to-one para, act out more, cause more issues, have more need for support. Oftentimes those parents then will say, you know what, I'm gonna hire an attorney, I want my child to be outplaced. Because if they don't get that support that they need to thrive in a school setting, oftentimes parents will look out of place, and that is much more expensive. The other thing that I do feel, talking to a lot of parents that either have a special needs child or a child with needs in the school district, or have children that are just going regular to the school, which I have both, right? I have one of each. I think the schools really need a full-time ABA support to support the staff and to help avoid bigger issues that then trickle down to parents asking for outplacements. I think the majority of the parents are looking for their children to stay within district, to be taken care of, and to receive the help that they need. And I think avoiding that issue by only having that ABA is applied behavior analysis, for those that don't know, helping children, you know, with their behaviors. I think if you're cutting that short by having most schools in the district have somebody in the building 2 days a week or 2.5 days versus 5 days a week. And I think by cutting that short, you kind of, you're pushing the issue in a different direction, and the issue becomes bigger and therefore more expensive. So I think looking into the option of possibly providing for the schools full ABA support, because I heard it earlier, there's a tremendous amount of children that do need that kind of support. So I kind of wanted to bring that up because I think people think about it, maybe not truly thinking it through completely, right? I think full-time ABA support in the school is very much needed. And if you're looking to save money and avoid children from being outplaced, I think it's even more essential to the success of those students being able to stay within the district versus getting outplaced. It's extremely expensive to outplace, and I think it can very much be avoided by getting the kids the help they need. Having one full-time ABA therapist is a lot cheaper. It costs about, call it $100,000 a year. Outplacing one single child is way more than that. So I think the math sometimes doesn't make sense. And I do see it that it's very disruptive towards other children if, certain behaviors aren't helped. So that's something that certainly came to mind. But I did want to know, is that something the board gives direction on, or is that the special, like, how does something like this work?
Who wants to answer? Mr. Peterson.
The short answer is we take direction from our special ed director and our administration about what they think best practices are. Things do come to us through the budget, but as Ms. Jacobson said before, this is not a board that in the past has said no to special ed requests. We trust their judgment, and in fact, we're also kind of the disciples of special ed, talking to other town bodies who often take a very just top line look. Well, why is this number going up? Why is incidence increasing? Why are these, and we're out there saying we're delivering the services to the children that they need. But we are not on this panel driving the educational decisions. We are listening to the advice of our subject matter experts, and we have I think a very good record of funding special ed to the degree that we have been asked.
Reducing one-to-one pairs, for example, would not be something that the board would decide on.
Not as a policy.
It's even more concerning, more surprising to me that there are a number of parents that have reported that their IEPs were really illegally changed without the parents' consent. That's a huge concern of mine.
I don't think they could talk about legal issues.
I know, but I do feel like. And I don't even expect an answer, but I do think the board needs to be aware that there is something going on, that a lot of parents are rallying up, and there's something coming down the pipeline that could be very expensive.
All I can say is if parents have complaints about their particular individual cases, to please bring them to the chain of command, to the administration. Well, you can go through building administrators and then up to the superintendent. And that's really the best way to go for an individual educational issue.
But who is overseeing that? That's, I guess, my question.
We have a director of special education.
Who is overseeing that?
Superintendent.
So that would be Ms. Sasani.
Sasani, yes.
Oh, all right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Hello. Okay. State your name for the board.
I'm Anya Mizak. I'm at 289 Brookline Terrace. I haven't talked in front of this group before, so I'm a little nervous, a little intimidating, just say that out loud.
No one's gonna bite.
Yeah. I'm sure you are.
RTM, so you should be a pro.
Only once, I think. Anyway, so first of all, I want to thank you all for listening to all the creative ideas that have come up about the transportation, the bus issue. And I plan to come to the finance committee meeting to see the in-depth discussion about what other ideas they have for reducing cost and bus efficiency. So I will not go much into that right now because a lot of people already have. So I will take the time to talk about another issue that's very near and dear to my heart, which has to do with cell phone use. So I've noticed that the latest policy that was presented eliminates the use of cell phones in elementary and middle schools, which I'm thrilled to see, so thank you for that. But I was disappointed that at the high school level, the cell phones are only limited during class times. So I'd like to just present a few reasons why we should really consider banning phones at the high school level, bell to bell. I will say my kids right now are in elementary school, so this is a few years out. But I see what's happening to teenagers today, and I want my kids, when they get to high school, to have a phone-free school. So just a few things kind of I'll highlight about for some reasons to consider wall-to-wall banning of cell phones. One is I believe that banning phones between classroom times can strengthen in-person social connections. So high schools where students develop essential communication skills needed for college, their careers, and beyond. So instead of texting or scrolling, they could have real conversations, reducing social isolations and really creating true friendships, which I think they're there to do. Many students already report feeling left out when their peers are glued to their phones. So even if they don't have their phones, they can interact with the kids that do have them. Second, banning phones can support mental health and reduce anxiety. Research shows that constant phone use contributes to stress, anxiety, feelings of inadequacy, especially in teenagers. High school students already balance heavy academic loads, extracurriculars, social pressures. So a break from phone use, even just for a few minutes between class, can give them a real mental reset. Third, this can reduce cyberbullying and social media drama during school hours. If students aren't able to check or respond to messages between classes, there's less opportunities for real-time social media conflicts, gossip, bullying, or bullying to disrupt the school environments. Kids can also just be more of their true selves because they don't have to be afraid that they're going to be recorded doing something silly. And lastly, I'll just highlight, this can prevent carryover distractions in the classroom. So if students are checking their phones between classes, they enter the next class still thinking about text, social media, posts, videos, whatever they may be looking at. And without access to their phones, students can arrive with a clear mind and prepare to focus on the lesson. So that's my thought on that. I'm curious to hear from everybody here what their thoughts are about extending the policy to eliminate phones, not just during class times, but really for the entire school day.
Thank you, Anna. Anyone want to go first? Mr. Lee.
First, the way I look at a cell phone, especially as a senior, I think first thing we have to do is these kids are glued to their phone, no doubt, right? When you get to that next level, I have a daughter who's a freshman in college, everything's on the cell phone in school. They can't get into their dorm room, they can't get their food in the cafeteria, they can't do anything. They're in the dorms, the RAs used to have meetings, everything's a little text, right? That's the way it is. Part of the problem, I think, I'm partially to blame. First of all, I bought the kid the cell phone. And what am I doing I'm on the cell phone just as much as they are, like everyone else in this audience. I mean, it's gotta be taught how to use it responsibly, right? And you're always gonna have kids that wanna film everything. Everybody wants to be a social media influencer and things like that. And if you look now in college, they're teaching that, right? They're teaching, my daughter is required to take an AI class. And what do? They learn it on their cell phone, the AI. So it's part of their life. I think what we have to do is properly educate our kids and show the example, and it starts at home, right? Elementary school, I'm sorry, elementary school kids should not have a cell phone. They're not going out buying a $1,200 iPhone and things like that. They have to be taught, but they're also learning from their parents, right? When you walk in the Colony Pizza on a Saturday, it's packed. How many of those little kids are watching something on an iPad or a cell phone or something like that? Part of it's responsible from home. And then we want to be at this level, elementary and middle school, but I think in high school, we're giving them a little more freedom. We also have to teach them along the way too, because in reality, it's gonna be part of their life. It's part of our life, how we have to just teach the responsible behind that. That's my thought on that.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobson.
I'll refer to the policy committee chair or policy committee members in terms of the draft, but I believe what's been drafted so far anyway, and it hasn't come forward yet, is what's in alignment with the state guidance, right? I believe that is the case in the draft. So that comes from the state. So what you're suggesting is something stronger than the state guidance, right? And I'm in the same vein that I would like to see a robust section in the policy that has to do with the school home partnership, because the state guidance does talk about different stakeholders' responsibilities, including parents and guardians in terms of their responsibilities in partnership with this. So as of right now, I'm comfortable with a scaled incremental change over time, to be quite honest, but I'll be curious to see what comes out of the committee.
Mr. Guernsey.
Thank you, and I think I'm really actually very happy that we're tackling this in policy because there's a lot to discuss. I do see the high school as being sort of a different beast, right? So our challenges are different, but our students, I mean, we have 18-year-olds in, right? So these are adults, adult decisions, or they're not making adult decisions, whatever that means. But they have jobs after school. They're taking care of siblings. They have cars. They're driving. There are a lot of needs that they have for their cell phones that I think are not wants, they're actual needs. So I do see it as being a different a character, right? So how are we approaching that? I don't know. I mean, I'm looking forward to having that conversation and to continuing to hearing from the public. But I was actually happy to see Mr. Lee and Ms. Jacobson said that it's sort of scaled the way that it's presented. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Asa.
Yeah, and I just, Mrs. Maxon Canelli knows this, that prior to COVID, I had asked the policy committee before I was on it to bring this up, and I had actually proposed a district-wide ban on cell phones. And you think we're hearing from people now about technology and stuff? I wish you could have known the backlash I caught over that from high school parents about saying, absolutely, you cannot ban cell phones. You cannot take our kids' cell phones away. X, Y, and Z, and so many reasons. And the amount of outcry that was given, COVID happened, and quite honestly, I never pushed it again because of the response I got. And from the parents that I have heard, I have elementary kids, so I haven't experienced elementary and middle school now. So I haven't experienced the high school yet. But I can tell you that recently with a lot of these proposals and the drafted policy, I can tell you that I have heard from just as many parents that don't want cell phones banned in high school than I have that do. And I think a lot of us that are talking about this do have younger kids and aren't in high school. So I do feel like I have to listen to all the voices. And I do plan to listen to all the voices. I don't have any preconceived decisions already made, but I do look forward to the conversation and policy.
Thank you, Mrs. Flynn.
Hi, similar to Ms. Guernsey and Mr. Ace's points, I'd be in support of a bell-to-bell like we have written for our elementary and middle school tonight. I do think that the high schools present different challenges. And, there's a lot of things that I want for our high school kids that aren't reality. There are a lot of needs that they have. They have jobs, they have responsibilities. Some of our students are of legal age. So I do think when we're talking about that 9 through 12 piece, I think we need to look at the data. I think what you speak to about, I think a lot of us have read Anxious Generation. I followed a lot of other science too that's come out. And I think it's like anything with science, this is an evolving piece that we're kind of looking at from this end. I will implore parents to continue looking at it, that partnership piece, especially when it comes to the social media. In the state, it's illegal to have a social media account until you're 16. I can't tell you how many children I know that have social media accounts and they did not buy their own cell phone. And this isn't, any parent can make judgments that they want for their home, but I am so thrilled to see campaigns from our parent community saying, hey, you may think your kid's taking their cell phone or their Chromebook into their room at night and not turning it on. Well, you might want to peek open your door and you should be taking every device into your living room. Or I think that there is an education piece that we can be a part of together. I've done, I think, 3 forums with Mr. Testani and our PTA council and their digital wellness committee. Kudos to you all. You have done tremendous work. But I would echo Mr. Asa in saying that as many people that are supporting this work in this bucket, you're gonna hear from the parents that need to communicate with their children or their child has, there's also the caveats that I don't wanna just speak to, but I think that it is gonna be one where I think we have to listen to all voices and all stakeholders, including our students. And I'll tell you, I've had the chance to be with students in different settings, and there is no larger advocates for getting off the cell phone than our teenagers. So I think listen to our teenagers, listening to our staff, which we, like I said, I'm thrilled to be having these conversations. I want to be having them. I want our parent community involved and I want our staff involved. Because the time they're in school is for school. The time they're outside of school, like I said, we all make choices what we do for our own children and that impacts their school day as well. So I think we're all here to be in a partnership together and we look forward to it.
Thank you.
Comments, closing comment, or
What was that?
make a closing comment?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just say, our kids' brains are still developing. 16, 18 is so young. And I do think it's difficult to teach them the lessons they need to know at this age. And I think as far as teaching them responsible technology use, I think they'll have time to do that after high school. I don't think we have to feel like we need to teach them now. I think we could just, we do some of it, but I don't think that can replace just taking the phones away entirely. And I think it's really interesting that you're hearing differently from parents of younger kids like myself than others. And I do wonder, even if we keep the policy as it is, which I wish we don't, but even if we do, I'm wondering if a few years from now, we'll have to revisit when the parents of younger kids are coming in with very different attitudes about phones. So thank you very much for giving us this.
Thank you, Anna.
Any other members from the public that wanna come on up? Greg, hi Greg, just state your name and your address for the public.
Welcome to my first name. It's nice to see you, Marcy. I'm District 4, a District 4 rep. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Greg Bosch, 470 Jackman. With permission from the PTA president sitting in the back of the room, thank you for being here, Ellie. PTAC's next meeting is March 19th, and she just told me to say everybody's invited. So if there's other members of the public that are feeling a little uninformed, want to be more informed, it's in this room, March 19th. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Good evening. This board previously cut 2.3 million from the Board of Ed's high water mark for the school budget, if I can refer to it that way. The cut included the reduction of 6 high school teachers, and my understanding, although I'll let individual board members speak for themselves, of course, is that at least 2 members of this board voted against the BOE budget because of that cut. First Selectman Bill Gerber received the budget, as always occurs in the town of Fairfield, and cut it another 4.9 million. We learned that on Friday around midnight. And so for those keeping score, a total of 7.2 million in reductions between the work of this board and the first selectman has been done to the school budget. Release of the town budget was accompanied by a press release, which I'm going to quote from. Despite significant cost inflations and contractually obligated wage increases, the first selectman said the budget managed to fully fund the services that residents expect and deserve. So I have to say, as a father of 2 kids in elementary school and a long tenure ahead of me in this district, this statement doesn't seem accurate as a parent of children in Fairfield Public Schools, especially if we are talking about serious cuts to busing, STEAM, Spanish, and other programming. The first selectman's budget proposal is a 4.49% increase for the district. If we just looked at the remaining salaries and benefits themselves, those so-called contractual budget obligations, we'd need 4.73% in order to cover those costs. And that's saying nothing of the extra paper, supplies, and the costs of all the other stuff once the kids are in the classroom and the teachers are with them. So I appreciate this board passing the resolution to move the elevator and security system and fire alarm to bonding. We sit here tonight with fingers crossed, hoping that other town bodies will accept this bonding resolution. Can you speak on behalf of the RTM, Marcy? But I am sending positive vibes your way. My last sentence here is that we're still facing $3.95 million shortfall, even after all the productive stuff we've done here tonight. And I just want to point out, because it was in a slide that accompanied the first selectman's budget presentation on Monday, that on a dollar basis, that represents the 3rd biggest cut in all of the years that were present on that slide. So this is the budget crisis that we're in. And I feel like we owe it to the public, to people like Ms. Hood from Sherman that were here earlier tonight, and all of the other parents that didn't realize that this was coming, to put it all on the table so that parents of this district can go tomorrow, 10 a.m. Wednesday, to meet at the Board of Selectmen and make sure that they understand the impact that $7.2 million worth of total cuts is going to make to this school system. So I will welcome your thoughts in 2 areas. To the veteran members of this board who are perhaps here because you have experienced this level of cuts in the town of Fairfield before. Please tell young parents like me what it's like. And 2, What are our options? What else is on the table? Spanish, STEAM? Busing?
I'm gonna go to the board members. Do you wanna go by seniority? I don't know if that's Miss Jacobson or Miss Max and Canali.
So, I mean, a little bit of, obviously, you point out that this is the third biggest cut. Unfortunately, I mean, in all fairness, I also have to say this is also the largest budget ask in well over 2 decades. And I have to acknowledge that because I'm not gonna tell just one side. I'm advocating for the Board of Ed budget. You know, regardless of my vote, regardless of amendments, regardless of anything else, I believe in the budget. I believe in supporting this district. But I have to be fair. We have been, as of right now, if nothing changed, we have been granted a $10 million increase. And I am grateful for that. I don't want to denigrate that there's still a tremendous amount we have been handed. So that as it's the third biggest cut, again, it's the largest budget ask. But we do have those contractual obligations. We do have to meet them. In terms of what's on the table, I think a better question is what's not. You know, in all fairness, because to be clear, and we do a phenomenal job, I think, vetting the budget. A lot of it is asking, what is this? What does this represent? How has this been done? But to be clear, there is an awful lot of status quo that we never challenged. And that would have taken probably, another month. Certainly would have gone past, our normal adjournment time. This is something we've been doing for 5-6 years. I'm not filling in the something, I'm just leaving that kind of as a blank line. What's something that, hey, can we hear more about this? Is this actually working? I will give one example, and I'm not saying that this needs to move forward because I don't know if we know enough. But a year ago, we made a $500,000 investment in our middle schools. I would want to know, are we getting anything for that? I do know that it has resulted in one middle school, you could argue the one most in need of smaller class sizes without by and far and away, larger class sizes than our other 2 middle schools. That's what, to me, what this board can't be afraid to do is ask. And people can't get offended because a question is asked. We have to be, and again, that's where this is so valuable. And that the public is engaged on this because someone might have an idea out there that we haven't thought of. The policy committee meeting on transportation was outstanding for that. There were definitely a few ideas I hadn't thought of. The conversation we had with staff was further enlightening. Things came from Mr. Papageorge that I didn't know before. And we have to start that early, which I think is gonna happen. So in terms of seniority, the issue, the largest budget cut since 2011 I've dealt with, I believe, was about 2.1 million. So it has been done. This is obviously just short of double that. And so that is uncharted territory. I don't have experience with that. Nobody at this, well, unless people do it in their private businesses, nobody here has dealt with something like that. But I think I do hope parents tune in. I do hope there's thoughtful conversation about this. But most importantly, I hope we get to start to work early asking good questions so that something that might seem like an easy cut, yeah, well, maybe if we spent a little bit more time digging in on it, we might have come up with a better way to do something. And that, for example, the easy example right now is what finance is about to do with this transportation. The easy thing would be to just move the distance. But maybe we don't have to do that. And that's where we need to take the time to dig into that further. And again, that's where that policy committee, I thought a lot of great stuff came out of that. I don't know if it's all possible, but we have to be willing to ask, we have to be willing to listen, and then converse about it and dig in. So I think that the most important thing we're gonna need to be able to do is not wait till May. Whatever may happen, we've got to start thinking about it early. So long answer to really say, nobody has experience doing that because I don't even know it's not this century has a situation like this existed.
Ms. Jacobson.
So actually in 13-14, there was an over $4.2 million reduction. However, then Superintendent Dr. Title found 75% of that cut in health insurance line item. Sometimes the health insurance works out in our favor in terms of we get a preliminary number, it goes in the budget book, and then we get an update from the state and it goes down. And that's helpful. And this year, the opposite occurred, preliminary number, and then when it was updated, it actually went up significantly. from 8 to 12%, so we had to add that in there. So in that one instance that was anywhere in this world, most of it came out of one line. I'm not hopeful that that's gonna happen in this situation, but I would hope that our now superintendent would be digging into everything to do with nutrition, the actuarial accounting of that and trying to find it there. Other than that, the year over year reductions that have occurred, you've seen things disappear that, aren't here today that were here 20 years ago, or 15 years ago. I'm hopeful actually that everyone just stops talking to us about what they'd like to cut and actually gets to Board of Selectmen tomorrow morning. And Board of Finance after that, and the RTM tomorrow instead of that. Obviously, I agree that this is conversations we're gonna have to have, but right now the energy should be like, cut 2.5 million. Cutting another 5 million or even 4 million is a transformational situation. I know we've been through transformational situations before, and if you ask me what they're like, I was in the line saying don't do it, so, with the t-shirts on, so it's not fun. So I'm hoping that right now the energy is less on like, what are you guys gonna look at to cut, and more on talking to our other elected representatives in our town to not do it in the first place. That's my hope. But I agree with Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. Sorry. I agree that once we have a better idea, because I don't like playing in these hypotheticals, at least after Board of Finance anyway, that a series of workshops would entail, so that we don't end up on a night like throwing spaghetti at the wall, with people, throwing things out there that we haven't analyzed and done a longitudinal analysis on. Evaluate for their effectiveness or lack thereof. One area that we didn't touch in all the reductions, we haven't looked at administration. So that's an area that I'm gonna be wanting to be looking at as well. That's one area in this whole budget that didn't see anything come out of it, and we touched SPED, we touched extracurricular, we touched textbooks, we touched technology, we touched maintenance. I'd actually like to restore the maintenance. I've already got a $1.5 million maintenance list that doesn't have any funding. And then we cut $250,000 from it already. So, I have concerns on that, and I'm gonna wrap it up. The 15 years I've been doing this, while all the people were sharpening their pencils on the Board of Ed budget, there were two consistent messages. Keep it as far away from the classroom as possible, and don't cut maintenance. So I don't know, you probably talked about my vote. We went right into the classroom and maintenance, and I have concerns on that. So that's just speaking for myself.
Thank you, Ms. Guernsey.
I'm sorry, you had your hand up earlier.
Thank you, and I'm gonna echo a little bit of what Mrs. Jacobson said, because it's like, let's not skip forward, right? So you collectively have so many opportunities to use your voice. And this is the time to do it, right? Because we're gonna be ready to have these conversations after we hear back from Board of Finance. We can do that work, but I do think it's a little bit premature. I mean, it's gonna be painful. I'm one of the two people that did not vote for this budget. I will advocate for it because it's my job. But like Mrs. Jacobson said, don't touch the classroom, right? I'm not gonna vote for a budget that cuts teachers, right? So, what are we gonna look at? I can't answer that today, but let's get to work, right? And if that means that this community needs help, we need to offer different opportunities to come out to PTAs. We're always available to do that. Board members can do that. We can host coffees. We can have these conversations if this community needs that education piece, but let's get to it because the work starts tomorrow morning. I guess like in terms of what happens after Board of Finance, fantastic idea about this leaving room to workshop these ideas because we don't want to do anything in haste. So thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Stein.
Thank you. Just to echo on Ms. Guernsey's point, we did our work, we passed our budget, and I think it is a little bit of a misnomer in our community, the structure. And even a little bit more micro than that, the communication piece of that structure. I'll say our board has one email that you click on and you reach all 9 of us. I don't believe that's the case for all the other town bodies. I think we've moved to like a form for one, and I would just encourage as much education as that as possible for someone who's been a part of this process for a long time. It used to be 3-click emails, email all the town bodies in one shot. That's not how it is anymore. And to Ms. Guernsey's point, and I think Ms. Jacobson, we're all here to be partners in that. I'm happy to fill in on March 19th as my role as PTA council rep, but I think engaging on how this process works, none of this is inevitable. You know, we've seen cuts, you know, when I was in your exact role, and there were rallies on the town green for $1 million cut, let alone a $4 million cut. Like, this will have an impact. And I think I would never venture to speak for the 9 of us, but we all take a same vow to this board. And I don't think any of us want to do anything that's going to harm the district or students. So, you know, as we move through this work, I think workshopping is a great idea. I think continuing to have communications with the district and Mr. Testani as his administration as they do their work. I think it's also really important to continue communicating with other town bodies who ultimately have the deciding force on what this total number will be that we have to deal with in May. So thank you for your advocacy and thank you for your continued questions.
Mr. Peterson?
I'm gonna, 2 things. So tomorrow, 10 a.m., town hall, my job is to go down, sit next to Superintendent Testani and advocate for what the board passed. And having sat at the table, I understand why everyone voted the way they did, and I understand that everyone here is a powerful advocate and believer in public education. One of the narratives that I always like to push back against is that there's some level of fluff or extra, you know, in the budget. Just a couple of points, kind of, you alluded to this in a slightly different way. Salaries plus benefits, that's 78% of the budget. If you add tuition, most of which is for special ed, that brings that number up to a little over 82%. If you add instructional services, which is mostly things like physical occupational therapy, speech therapy, all of those things, you're up to 86%. You add utilities to keep the lights on, you're at 88%. And if you just those categories, what's left is $28 million, of which about 13 million is transportation. And we're talking about, you know, maybe a $750,000 cut to transportation, right? So like if you take all those things, moving kids to school, keeping the lights on, paying for the actual educational services, you're down to a pretty small amount of money. And we have tried for years in various ways to look for efficiencies and the administration has done this in a lot of areas too. Some things are difficult to do. Maintenance is always a thing that we struggle with because we don't want to get behind and we always feel like we're behind in our projects. And there's always so much to do. We have this massive 3-tier system of things that we would just love to do that we never kind of get around to. So like the idea that there's a lot of extra fat to cut is just not the case. And we're always trying to look for efficiencies. We're trying to get better about it all the time. One thing though, you talk about what's next, and this is going to be an update to the board. Literally right before I was here, I was at town hall with First Selectman Gerber and the superintendent. The First Selectman called a meeting, a small group meetings, to talk about possible shared services. If we could find any savings in combining services that are currently split between the town and the Board of Ed. I think we had a constructive discussion about it. It was something that had been mentioned in a previous meeting at Town Hall back in early January before our debate started, and I suspect will continue. I did voice some concerns about, do we want to rush into something that would perhaps need to be ready by July 1st? I have some serious concerns. I'm sure the board would have concerns about how any kind of combination would work. These discussions are still in the embryonic stages, but I know that that's something the First Selectman has expressed some interest in talking about. And even if it doesn't bear fruit this year, that could be something moving forward that could have some progress to it. But I did want to say both to the board and to the public that that's an avenue that has been opened up for discussion. I don't know really which it's going to impact this budget cycle, but I welcome the conversation.
So.
And I'm gonna just go a little long, but it seems to be the wrap up, so. Or close, maybe not.
I do want to echo a lot of what everyone else said, but few things that I wanna point out is that we have a lot of contractual obligations and went through the whole town process when the town did approve these. Then on top of that, at the table, when we got our budget books, we were given a surprise that the transportation was gonna be somewhere between 20 and 25% more than we had anticipated, which did again increase our budget. We had all come to the table prepared to cut as much as we possibly could, and I feel we did a really good job. I personally voted for the budget, even though I didn't agree with cutting the teachers, because I thought that was a step to just really trim as much as we possibly can. I have concerns. Do I think there might be a little bit more to trim? Maybe. But any large cut, anywhere close to the cut we're being asked to make, equals pain. I'd be lying to the parents out there saying it's gonna be painful. And I sat here and said I refuse to cut programs, and I will still try to take that stance, but a cut this large, it's almost impossible to not cut programs, and it's unfortunate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for your work. Thank you, Marcy, for being here.
Thank you.
Good evening.
If the next person wants to come up and state their name. How many more people are planning on speaking today, just for what, 1, 2? Just one? Oh, 1, 2, great.
Hi, I'm Lauren Efren, 241 First Street. Just to reiterate what Greg said, we recognize, I recognize certainly all the work that you've done to get to this point, and I know that things are in flux and change. We trust you, we elected you to speak on our behalves, right? And so I'm gonna advocate certainly tomorrow to push back against this idea that you guys need to cut anything from your operating budget. This is what you need to operate, literally. I don't understand why we can't push back. You are the largest, FPS is the largest employer in town. Bigger than Fairfield View, bigger than SHU. People don't move here for the AAA rating. The Moody and Fitch, raised this town. They move here for the schools. They move here for the teachers. They move here for the community. There are 17 schools in this town. That is massive. I grew up with 3. 1 elementary school, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. And most of the 100 kids I graduated with, I was in kindergarten with as well. So this is a whole new ballgame here. I can't believe the things that they're asking you guys to consider. So I just to a little recap for those that aren't aware, we had a meeting with First Selectman Gerber and Superintendent Testani last Friday at Dwight to discuss the situation that we find ourselves in now in that building, and I'll try to keep it brief, but we have serious concerns about the state of that building and the health and well-being of the students and the staff within it. And there are further delays with this whole town working group. I would ask that you advocate to bring it out of the dark. One of the things that he mentioned was a small building committee affixed to the town working group. He actually.
Can I just interrupt?
Yes, Mr. Gerber. Yes, absolutely. The biggest message that we as a community, and there was about 60 people in the room who came to advocate on behalf of the students and the staff. We had teacher reps from the union there. It's transparency. It is, everything is in the dark. We have no idea. This new process is completely unheard of, and we can't believe there's not even deadlines for when the selection will be done for. I mean, I know that envelopes have been opened. Anyway, it is concerning to say the least. And he mentioned this small building committee attached to the town working group. I really would encourage that moves forward and in a way that we can feel good about. Seeing that it's completely in the dark now. And also just to the facilities committee, you guys did a tremendous amount of work, and I don't think that's been acknowledged. It was said that it was acknowledged. No, you could not get to real numbers without an investment. The investment that the town is making to the tune of $1 million, talk about savings, you could cut that right there. Because that's gonna be repeated again once it comes back to you, and then you have to make another decision on what you're gonna do with Dwight a year, 2 or 3 from now. And you're gonna have to spend 3.4 million or more at that point. I'm sorry, that's just, in my opinion, a waste of time. And when things that Mr. Gerber mentioned, like portables, right? If Dwight were to move to a renovation, you all know how expensive those are. My understanding is it's like 500,000 for like 10 students in each of these. Not only is that a safety and security concern, but for just the smallest school in the district, that would be over $10 million right there. The gap in reality and the perception of what is doable and how that is saving the town money, I don't understand. That to me is ridiculous. Okay, and then the last thing I'll say is that Spanish and STEAM are foundational. They are so precious. I would hate to see something as wonderful as those two programs being cut. So I'll just speak for my own students. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
Surprised that Dwight Parent didn't come up earlier because I have an update about this too. So after my, thank you to Mr. Krasnoff, by the way, for forwarding me the video of the Friday Dwight PTA meeting. It was useful to watch. And it also gave me an opportunity to contact the first selectman because I think he mischaracterized the way that I have been involved in this process on behalf of the Board of Education. So I sent him a comprehensive list of all the contacts that I've had. I said, is there some way that we can regularize this? The public clearly has an appetite to know what's going on. So today, right before I came here, as part of this meeting at the town hall, he and I discussed, as you said, the creation of a small building committee, perhaps a 3-person committee, for the sake of interfacing with the working group. So the theory would be, and 2 things. I have asked that once a consultant is selected, that if there is a schedule of meetings, that I be informed about that so that I can attend those working group meetings or send a representative from the board so that we can both get information and give input. He was very open to that. I don't have a schedule about when that is going to be finalized, but that's something that I'll be following up with him. But then the idea that this mini building committee, which would probably be the kernel of a ultimately larger building committee, would have the opportunity to have meetings in public, to have minutes, to have public comment. So details to be worked out, but he seemed very open to that idea because I've mentioned this to other board members and members of the public that have reached out. I understand that there is frustration with the way this has gone about. It is a new process, as you say. I think Town Hall is feeling it out the same way that we are. I have been advocating for more Board of Ed access. When I've asked, it's been granted. And my hope is to put that on a more firm, transparent foundation. So I can get out information both to the board and to the public. So as I get more information about that, I'll be happy to make updates at board meetings if anyone wants to reach out to me directly. That's 3 hours ago that I was at his office talking about this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
I will say this, as far as the building committee, even if they went the traditional route of the building committee, it's actually still out of the BOE's hand. It's a town project, right? The BOE has updates here and there, and the building committees have public meetings, but it's still not within the realm of the BOE. My suggestion is at this time, right? They are moving forward. They do have somebody, I believe, in contract to move forward with that. I would contact if I'm not mistaken from that meeting, there is a project manager from the town. I would advise everyone to reach out to that person. And I believe her name would be on the website of the town. I haven't checked, but I would reach out to that project manager to get updates that way, because in theory, even if it was done how it was in the past, the BOE wouldn't be as involved except for a rep from the BOE going.
Just can I jump on top, because one thing I forgot, I think it was a request at the Dwight PTA meeting was for some update. some publicly accessible web update, and I've been told that that's being worked on.
It's not just for Dwight, though, it's for all town.
It'll be a page on
comments.
the Fairfield town website. But I have no details about it. I was told that it was a request, and I was told that it was being worked on. I have no schedule or
It
anything.
was not actually a request, it was offered by the chief of staff for the first selectman. And while I appreciate it, she also came up to me at the end and said, that will also take time. I mean, as long as it doesn't take 10 months. Great.
I'm just giving you the most update.
I appreciate that. It's just like, there's a lot of things that are promised and then not followed up on. So I will hold my breath for that one.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobson?
I'm good with answer.
Okay, anyone else? All right, thank you very much. One of the remaining two who would like to speak?
Sorry, I didn't say, I would think raise my hand.
That's all right.
It's gonna be so fast and I don't even
Just
have a
state your
question,
name
I'm
and your
just gonna
address.
say work.
State your name and address and write down on the list.
Megan McHale, 188 Range Road.
You've set the playing field now, let's see how,
I first wanted to say that you all had a meeting that Carol attended and Mr. Testani where people had the opportunity that was publicly offered to come and hear about the budget. So anyone who says they didn't know what was going on, that was available to everyone and there were 4 people there. So just saying. And also in
you're
our
referencing the brown bag.
the brown bag breakfast, I guess, because it was at like 9:30 a.m.
Not lunch anymore.
And it was very useful and helpful to the 4 of us who attended. And I also want to say that there is, like Greg himself left the room, or maybe left completely. It has been an amazing advocate and really has shared a ton of information with the PTA Council. And it is super frustrating that people don't read these emails. So and there were multiple parent squares about this event tonight. And people, I mean, this is like not bad. But you know, like communication is happening, so I don't think it's really fair on you guys to say that you aren't doing enough because I think that you do a lot and it is a lot to keep up with, but it's out there. Okay, so I just wanna read to you what I'd originally written, which now feels not necessary to say here tonight, but which I hope I will have the opportunity to say tomorrow at the first selectmen's meeting at the Board of Selectmen. And if not, via email and in the future at other advocacy opportunities. I was here for your final budget discussion in January. I left at 11:30 p.m. after 4.5 hours, but you all were still working. It was very clear to me at that time that you understand the needs of our schools and care deeply about the experience of both our students and staff members in our district. I understand that the Board of Selectmen has asked you to cut the budget significantly despite the fact that most of the increase is due to contractually obligated and well-deserved salary and benefit increases for the staff. I hope that you will do anything in your power to hold strong on the budget as is. The items that have been suggested for removal represent significant losses for our community. Expanding the walking range will only mean more cars on the road and more pollution. It will of course also be an added burden on working parents. Losing Spanish denies our children the opportunity to adopt a second language at a young age when they are best absorbed, not to mention the critical experience of understanding another culture. I'm regularly disappointed by this town's obsession with the bottom line. I would like to think I live in a community where residents support each other's needs and trust their elected officials to spend their tax dollars carefully. Instead, it often feels like each person is fighting for their own thing without ever considering the bigger picture. A strong community has quality public schools and spends the money it takes to make them so. So, thank you. I don't have to say anything.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan. If the next person wants to come up.
Hello. I'm Ellie Fategi, parent of Milton kids, 5th grader and 2nd grader. Address is 98 Flora Boulevard. So I have been a broken record on this topic. I apologize, but I cannot let it go until I see it through because that's the type of person I am. I'm here to talk about implementation of 2 policies to help kids re-engage in the real world during the school day. one, away for the day, and two, delay and reduce. So from an away for the day perspective, phones are experience blockers and a serious distraction during the school day. A recent JAMA article cited that kids aged 13 to 18 spend 25% of their day on their phones on social media. So not to bring up like a lunch menu or anything like that. This is just talking social media. I'm talking Snapchat and all those other TikTok and all those other things that they're on. And this is during the school day. So I'm just here to say that the school day is precious. We need to protect it and give kids back a distraction-free environment. State legislatures are taking policy action across the country to protect children and creating phone-free schools. Towns around us have already adopted Away for the Day. Darien, Wilton, New Haven, Stamford, and Westport is currently in the planning stages. So that's the one piece I wanted to talk about. I have a lot more. I'm gonna skip it. It's past my bedtime. As far as delay and reduce, on school devices and screens, I think a delay and reduce strategy is very important. Please evaluate the use of screens in elementary schools, reduce screen time, allow for more socialization, remove screens from breaks like snack time and dismissal. You know, they shouldn't be watching a screen while they're snacking. They should be talking to each other. And I'm talking about second graders, third graders. Eliminate gamification apps. Prioritize print over screens for reading and writing in our elementary school age children. Also, we recently received communication from the district that YouTube and Google Maps don't meet the state privacy requirements. All this time we've been using it. And we were just recently offered an opt-out. So that's another concern I have, again, because it's so late, I'm not gonna get into it. But what other apps don't meet the standard and why are they not being evaluated? And I think with that, I'm just gonna leave my comments there.
Thank you, Ms. Flynn.
This was actually something that I brought up during budget season and that Mr. Testani pretty quickly assured all of us was going to be something that wasn't gonna continue. The using of devices during indoor recess, using of devices during snack time, using of devices during any kind of lunch, I would, just as a board member, I'm just saying, it's not something I would support. In terms of the apps, I got the same notifications that you did. I am concerned about them. I had spoken to Mr. Shastani briefly, but I think it's something that we should definitely be, I asked my fourth grader how many apps he had on his Chromebook, and he said, I have 56 immediately. I said, how do you know that? And he goes, well, we have 2 that are mandatory and I added all the rest and now I have 56. So I think it might be time for us to look at how many apps not only are our kids using, but are just available to them. And I think like any district, a good audit I don't know how, I think it's something that we need to look at. And I think like you're talking about this reduce and delay, as quickly as all these programs came in, I think all of us know during COVID especially, it was new program. I don't know that we've ever looked back at what we can pull back. And I think that this might be an appropriate time to do this, especially for our elementary schoolers. I think middle school and high school, we know the technology that is needed for them to access our curriculum. And we need to be careful in terms of that balance, but especially for our elementary schoolers, I think we can, at least I can say that that's something I would definitely like to take a look at.
Thank you. First. Mr. Krasnoff.
I just wanna give a different perspective and I get exactly, I know how you feel. Some of it is management at home too, and I'm not saying.
I'm talking about the school day.
No, I understand that, but like Chromebooks going home and the apps.
Policy, and I don't know how many hours they spend in the day.
I think every school and class does it a little differently. I know I've heard classes do as much screen time as you say they do, and I'm not okay with that. But there are other teachers that do use them for productive use. So to me, there's a fine line and we gotta find that fine line. And the right line, and maybe it is through policy, maybe it's, through conversations with Mr. Testani. But I do see values in some of the stuff that's on the Chromebook. I know more than one kid that's taught themselves advanced math on the book themselves because they were interested in it and they just had something they could learn more about. So to me, it's almost like a resource and teaching tool as well. But I agree with you, in the classroom, it should not be abused. I personally don't let my kids use YouTube, especially on their Chromebook. I didn't even know you could get YouTube on the Chromebook, but that, I guess you can. So I hear what you're saying, and I think it's more just policy and Mr. Tistani having a conversation and make sure the teachers know there's a right way to use it and a wrong way to use it. Thank you, yes.
Ms. Guernsey. Thanks so much for staying on top of this, because I don't think we've done the work here yet. So we've asked, there have been board members here that have talked to the superintendent about like, hey, let's assess this, right? Can you figure out how many hours the kids are using during school, what they're looking at? So he's doing that part, or at least that's my understanding, that he's looking into that part, right? So we're moving forward. We haven't heard what the result is, but like you, when I got the email about Google Maps and YouTube, I was like aghast. So I don't think we know. We don't really know what's happening. And that's kind of scary, honestly. It is. So thank you for staying on top of it and asking these important questions. And I don't know where this is gonna land, but let's do it. Thank you.
Ms. Jacobson.
So some of us were at the table when we went one-to-one. I think it was 18-ish, around there, something. One of the questions I asked at that time, maybe 2 superintendents ago or whatever it was, what are gonna be the standards around this with screen time and things like that? So still don't have that. And that's like one of the first questions that I asked. So we're supposed to be having this technology conversation that I think's been kicked over to the policy committee to start, so I hope that comes forward really quick. During budget, all the licenses, how many we have. That's another area to continue to look in, and I don't know why we would offer something that's illegal if you offer a passive consent. So, to minors. So I think that's an issue, that's a legal issue, but that's something I'm interested in pursuing and discussing further.
Max and Canali.
Yeah, I actually was keenly interested in hearing my fellow board members talk about it, because we haven't had just the conversation, because we are about to take this up in policy. And I am probably more extreme than anybody here at the table, because I am a classroom teacher and I want them gone. Every screen that's open, I'm having them do one thing and all of a sudden I'm seeing lights play off their face. I'm like, the thing I have you doing does not have flashing lights on it. Turn the cartoon off. So technology is nothing but a distraction unless it is very carefully managed, hyper managed, and there is no prefrontal lobe activity going on. There's no good judgments being made. They're watching whatever pops up as a notification, whatever conversation they're keeping in tune with. I want phones gone, period. And it's not that I don't care about the parental concerns, but you know what? Okay, sorry, I had the dime in my shoe. So we managed in schools without parents being able to get, probably half the people at the room don't even know what I'm talking about. But it's parents, we're not saying the phone can't go to school, we're saying you can't be on it. And parents that need to get the message, you can get them a message. You call the school secretary, a message can be brought to a child. You're not cut off from your child. But while they're in that school, they have a job to do. One, it's to grow as a person. Second, it's to grow as a learner. So I would get rid of them. That said, I also know darn well that was the only thing I asked about in the fall, I think, that was my ask. I wanted the information on the yonder pouches. I would have loved to have gone forward. Once I knew that the direction of the budget, it would have been irresponsible for me to bring that up. It doesn't mean I'm any less interested. The only advantage to not pursuing it this year is we're going to get to learn more from our surrounding districts. We've got it going on as a pilot at Walter Fitzgerald right now. I know surrounding districts are doing it, and we can learn because maybe it'll work. On the other hand, it's not a bad idea before making that investment. We can be a little conservative. Is it actually working? Because I'm not interested in the idea. I'm interested in what's actually going to happen. And if kids are breaking the pouches, if it's just turning, if it's not working, then we'll have learned from that before making the investment. But my interest is, I'm an absolutist on that. I want the phones gone. It's not doing them any good during the day. And I do recognize that they can have some very, very valid curriculum contributions. If in some of our arts courses and some of our video courses, I can see their use and sure, I'm willing to have that conversation. Because I don't know that we would provide all of that equipment. If they had that so readily, that would be quite an argument to make. But I'm one person, which is why I was staying quiet, because I wanted to hear what everybody else had to say about that. And then for the machines, yeah, I mean, I wish we had 2 firm 20 to 30-minute recesses a day. You know, I want them outside. I want them having unstructured time. I want them interacting. I want them playing. I want them also having a very, very rich curriculum, and access to 56 apps is horrifying to me. And that's also where I'm learning all the time. Every time a parent comes forward and says, I don't know this stuff is going on. I'm a little bit removed from the elementary school. So that's a new experience for me. You know, COVID happened. It brought with it some realities, but we're not wedded to those things anymore. And to end, I'm going to repeat only what everybody else has said, which is I'm looking forward to the conversation and policy. It was really helpful for me to hear my fellow board members weigh in on that. And, you know, I'm really hoping we bring forward some work that we're proud of, because it's important.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
The same boat as Mrs. Max and Kelly, except I had a penny in my shoe, not a dime. I don't
Did not.
So, it's the coolest thing.
Loafers?
Penny loafers. I don't find a reason why, and maybe it's because it's a different generation, but why an elementary school or middle school person should even bring them at all to school, if you wanna go that way. It's, again, it comes back to the parent. We don't have cooperation with the parents. We're gonna struggle, right? I think the high school, we all voice different opinions on that between the elementary school and the middle school. Why are they even leaving home with a cell phone? Whether they're on the school bus or you're dropping off and picking up, no reason they need a cell phone. They're not paying for anything, they're not doing anything. The Chromebooks can be managed in a way where it can be used. It is a tool. My daughter did well because of certain things on the Chromebook, but it has to be managed and done correctly. But again, a lot of it also has to do with what happens at home, right? We need the parents' involvement, and I know a lot of parents are like, no, it's not it is, because we're all just guilty of it too. And especially when, and you know, when you get older boys, and I'm not saying this, anything against girls, when you start doing fancy football and stuff like that, all the ads on TV are app driven, right? And I'm sure the 56 apps that her son has, how many of them are sports and how many of them are other things, right?
My
Chromebook.
4th grader doesn't have a phone.
What?
It's on the Chromebook.
Right, you're downloading stuff on the Chromebook, but still, at the end of the day, also parents have to be educated. You know, I'm listening around and people are saying, well, I didn't realize you can get tracked on these. Everything is trackable. Your cell phone is trackable. The reason malls do so well is because they know what person goes into what shop, spends how much time. Everything is trackable. We have to better educate ourselves first and then educate the kids and say, hey, this is what's going on. You gotta be careful of this, and this. But I think it's gotta be a huge partnership between the two, and we all have to stand by our guns behind it.
Thank you.
All right,
thank you.
We got one more person before you. I'm gonna echo Ellie, I'll try to be quick. We'll be maybe disorganized, let's now that I've been through this meeting.
Just state your name.
Yep, sorry.
That's
I
okay.
am Ally Seiss, 75 Sasko River Lane. Have a 5th grader, a 2nd grader, and a 4-year-old. And so I've lived this. I have older nieces and nephews who have lived this. And so the things that I'm asking for is, one, uniformity. When we get the Chromebook letter, all the different schools have different rules. A lot of the parents don't see it, so I'm asking for that maybe during policy, I don't know. But more uniformity across the schools for that. And with that, I'm asking that you, again, this doesn't cost money, talk to the 2nd grade class to say next year you will be getting this Chromebook. Most of the 2nd graders don't know that. Most of the 2nd grade parents don't know that they'll be getting that. So informing them, I think like that education piece is really important. We were talking about just moving forward with these things. I would encourage you to pause until it's done correctly. I know that's hard. So what else? And then just to kind of speak to some of the other points that have been brought up, the opt-out, opt-in. I don't know how that is legal to, the state of Connecticut says that it's not allowed, but we're allowing it. So I responded to that. I was given an email when you guys, not when you guys sent this out. I replied to that email. I think I replied to all of you. I just sent it to Mr. Testani today. But no one replied to me from the reg help at whatever, that they said questions and additional info. So I really think that that's inappropriate to keep using YouTube on these district issued computers. I also replied with, Emmett Dwight, to my chain. One parent responded from the second grade and two parents responded that they had seen it from the fifth grade. So people aren't seeing these emails, to your point. And I think part of the problem there is that 10 years ago, you weren't getting an email from your principals. So that you had to go to the PTA meetings to see your principals. And I think that's why the PTA, he was also a PTA president last year, the membership is down. And then I just wanted to speak to two more things quickly. So I'll speak to that later. But it adds to Ellie's point about the different districts that are doing different things. So many of them are moving forward with this. Darien just implemented, I think they are the most recent. And what they did for high schools was all of high schools except seniors. So they said, seniors, they're gonna be going to college, they need some freedom. This is the same thing that many of the studies say about social media. They say, wait until 16 and then test it out while they're still under your roof for 2 years. So I would encourage that, eliminating it at the high school level, except for seniors who do have cars, who do have free periods. What else? So again, just encouraging the away for the day, bell to bell policy, the education for the parents. And I'm just gonna say, cause he's not here, the fully formed brains. He's like, you know, I have it and it starts at home. We all have fully formed brains. We're adults and they don't. And so we are able to deal with this. Sorry, my last two things are probably STEAM and Spanish. Again, in comparing ourselves to other districts, I just can't believe that's even on the table. We're already behind in languages. Most of the districts around us start earlier. So I don't understand how we are moving backwards there. That might. Thank you. Mr. Krasna.
I love your cell phone idea. As much as I do like Chromebooks, I personally don't love the cell phones at school. I do think it's important for seniors to maybe have it, or maybe have the ability to prove you have a job or something that you need a cell phone. I don't know how that would work and how we could even write something like that into a policy with like maybe a note from the employer or something. To me, it's almost like the right to have a driver's license. I personally will not be on my kids' meetings, as I've told you before. And so thank you for bringing that idea up. I think that's really compromised to still keep it in the high school, like this early. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flynn.
I think a really good point you brought up was the uniformity between schools in terms of the usage for our Chromebooks. And to Mr. Krabs' point, I don't think that all of our teachers or all of our classrooms are misusing our Chromebooks. But one thing I do think is happening is that the communication in terms of usage, whether that be the liability policy, when they're using it, how they're using it, how it's coming back and forth is a little bit different across our schools. And we've seen this for other issues, especially in our elementary schools. And I think any efforts we could make to streamline that process not only would help parents, I think when they're communicating with each other and sharing as you guys are in digital wellness, I think it'll help there. And I think it'll also help the administration to give us the answers we're asking for in terms of usage and instructions. I think streamlining that is a really, really great idea.
Any other comments? And one more thing that I want to actually read from my phone, and this is kind of in regards, I think, Mr. Asa, you were saying that you get a lot of, you know, just as many parents saying, I want my kid to have a phone, and most of those arguments that I've seen actually are about safety. I don't know if that's different for high school, but the arguments that I've seen are when people talk to me, they're like, I want to feel safe, I want to feel if there's an emergency. I mean, we just live too close to Sandy Hook. But I wanted to share this quote with you guys. This is from the Stanford Advocate just a couple weeks ago. Research by National School Safety and Security Services emphasizes that cell phones in schools actually make kids less safe.
They jam 911 and emergency services, making it difficult for teachers and administrators to communicate with law enforcement. Phones buzzing and ringing with calls and texts from frantic parents may alert shooters as to where children are hiding. Panicked parents descending on a school may impede emergency vehicles' access to schools. So that is the biggest, I'm an elementary school parent, but that is the biggest feedback I've gotten, parents in middle school and elementary who feel differently about phones in schools. And so I hope that we can repeat that message to them, that it's problematic, and if that's your fear and problem. Thank you.
We have one more person, Selectman Kelly. Want Selectman Vitale to sign in?
Yeah, I got it.
Well, I'll tell you more about it, just Christine Vitale, 254 Vernon Hill Road. Speaking to you first, just as a co-chair of Fairfield Cares. I didn't get a chance to give public comment because of a special meeting. So on behalf of the coalition, I want to just thank the boards for your continued support of the survey. Appreciate the feedback and the conversation. I think that some of the edits that you gave us will actually make the survey more robust. Looking forward to working with the administration to get it moving in the schools and, you know, coming back to you with the results next fall. As a former Board of Ed member, I want to thank you for continuing to have these town hall meetings. I think they are so important for our community, and I want to thank all the parents that came out tonight and shared their thoughts and their passions. They're an important part of the process. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, I am not going to comment on the budget, aside from saying I will see you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Independence Hall for the public. There will be public comment tomorrow. There will not be public comment at Monday's budget deliberation vote. So anybody who wants to give in-person public comment, they should come tomorrow to give comment. Of course, we'll take public comment by email, and it was mentioned before, the Board of Finance will have their annual public budget forum, and encourage everybody just to check out the budget page on the town website. It's going to be updated as new information becomes available. The PowerPoint presentation the first selectman gave yesterday has now been posted, so just follow along. And that's it. See you tomorrow.
Can you just elaborate on, because people sometimes know how public comment works for Board of Ed. Can you just elaborate on how the public comment timing works
I
at the
think,
meeting? Like,
you know,
should people get there right at 10, or how does it work?
The public comment, yesterday was at the end of the meeting. So.
Or it is on your agenda for tomorrow.
Yeah, at the end of the meeting. So I can't speak to whether or not the first selectman or the selectman would move it, but right now it is at the end of the meeting.
I obviously won't be there because I'll be at work, but this is just curious because I do think we have a decent number of parents who are engaged, who are, prepared to go and show up. Are there any options at Town Hall to have a separate conference room opened and live streaming, so at least, because I don't know if I'm hoping there's a possibility that everyone might not fit. Is there an option prepared?
I don't think that there is probably an empty conference room in Independence Hall for live streaming. I would encourage, public comment isn't at the end, so if parents show up and there's not room, join remotely. I don't know. You call me on that one, but if I find out, if anybody is listening, and we can get out information tomorrow, but I don't think that there's going to be overflow space for.
Just wondering.
You said tag in and tag out here.
I know, but.
Yeah, but that room is a lot smaller.
It's a lot smaller.
I'm saying if that room fills, I think that that's a very good sign for the parent advocacy, and I wouldn't encourage anyone not to go. We've figured out in the past, like I've seen this room full and people file in and file out. So I think.
But I'm thinking that even to hear the presentation part, if you can't fit in the room, you can't fit in the room. So I understand the public comment, everyone will get a chance, but to actually be engaged in the full meeting, to hear the questions that might ensue, that could help with, so the point is you answered my question. Thank you.
Zoom, there's a Zoom link too, right?
I mean, there's Zoom, you can
Join Zoom.
join.
Right, but if you want to be
Yes.
there to give public comment and you don't wanna miss the meeting and there's no room in the physical space.
Can you give public comment via Zoom?
Yes.
You can give public comment. Yes.
All right.
Just saying thank you, so
Thank you. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Mr. Peterson.
Well, and I'll use my breath to say thank you very much for staying with us here until this 3 hours. That's much longer than our last town hall meeting. And look, it's well past my bedtime too, but I always prefer a robust discussion. I think I get a lot out of these meetings. I know a lot of you do as well. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. And unless anyone has any, Mrs. Jacobson?
I was making a motion.
Motion to adjourn. Mrs. Jacobson, second by Mr. Lee. All in favor? Vote is unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Guys, thank you all for Fairfield Cares.